Well, the reason I just joined immediately because my question is really uh, a little one, and I might sound be like kidding or anything, but seriously, if we think God doesn't exist, how come little babies, like little born babies, always laughing when they're in bed or sleeping? What's the reason of that?
Laughing is a biological reaction due to evolution. It has nothing to do with God.
Yeah, but how do they laugh even though their brains are so small and cannot even control their own hands sometimes?
Laughing is a product of evolution. That means it's ingrained in biology. It has nothing to do with conscious choice.
So it's not like they're seeing something funny or anything.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's again, I answered this question like 3 times already. It's a biological function due to evolution. Problem solved, mystery solved. We're done. Very easy.
Yeah, well, we laugh for a reason. Like we cry for a reason. You don't see
No,
people
you
randomly
don't.
cry or
Yes,
laugh.
yes, they randomly cry and laugh
Yeah,
all the
what's the
time.
reason for the little babies? Yeah,
No, no,
that's what I'm
shut up.
asking.
What did I just say? They do randomly cry and laugh all the time. Emotions are a product of the brain. You can stimulate someone's brain and cause them to cry or laugh from nothing. They have no choice. There's nothing that stimulates it. It's just a chemical reaction in the brain. People cry and laugh all the time for no reason.
Like for no reason.
Yes,
You
for no
might
reason. Literally
probably
just
live
answered that.
next to a bunch of crackers or something. People laughing and crying for no reason.
Did you not just listen to what I just explained to you? Are you too stupid to comprehend the words that I just explained to you?
No, you're making no sense. You're saying people laugh without any reason, like
How are
psychos.
you so dumb? Like what part of chemical interactions in the brain cause people to laugh did you not understand?
Yeah, chemical. Yeah, but those happens in certain situations.
No, idiot.
They don't
No,
just
no, stop,
happen
stop, stop.
randomly.
They happen
If you
randomly.
do any kind of
Stop talking.
drugs or you
Stop
see
talk.
something
You're a
fun,
dumbass. Dumbass. They happen randomly. It's literally called an epileptic seizure. Teenagers have emotional swings randomly for no reason. That there was nothing that caused it. This is a well-known fact in biology. You are just too dumb to know very basic facts about biology. Anybody else? Questions, comments, God, philosophy, politics? Uh, oh, I need to turn the chat on. Hello, Winston's mom. How's it going?
What's up?
Not much.
It's been a while, I think, since you streamed.
Well, I was sick last week.
Okay, makes sense.
Hello
So,
there. Getting back to the baby thing again, even if you maybe don't want to, I think they're just glad to be alive and laugh about it.
I don't think they have higher
That's sentiment.
concepts like that. I don't think they're able to understand they exist as an object and are alive.
Do they? Maybe you can't tell. They can't give you
We can
much.
tell. We can actually tell. That study's been
Oh,
done.
yeah, by brain scans or.
No,
Oh.
by doing psychological research. Like we can tell when someone recognizes themselves in a mirror versus if they just see a mirror as someone else,
Yes,
because
yes,
they're unable
yes.
to introspect and identify
Um,
individuality.
And maybe they are as conscious as a dog. As a stupid dog, maybe. And stupid dogs are always happy as well.
No, dogs are not always happy. Dogs are not stupid, and the level of consciousness is
Stupid
independent
dogs.
of the
Stupid
level.
dogs
Oh my
tend
God,
to
shut
be.
up. All right. So, level of consciousness is independent of the level of intelligence. So, say someone's as conscious as a dog doesn't make any sense. Consciousness and intelligence aren't the same thing.
I think they fail to understand that intelligence is one of the qualities of consciousness. But yeah, like we have stupid humans as well.
Clearly.
So I wonder how you deal with these guys. Like the last time I dealt with this one guy that I was like debunking, and then he kept saying like I told him like emergent spacetime is consensus, and you can look up all the different peer-reviewed journals, and you can find multiple papers that all agree on the same thing, especially from like other sources. And he was like, no, that's not consensus, not consensus. He literally asked me for like where it says verbatim that you can find the word consensus. That doesn't matter. Like I think he does not know how it works. Like how do you counter it? Like
Call
if
them
I
an
can
idiot.
tell you that.
Say, do actual research and pull your head out of your ass and stop wasting my time. That is the correct response.
Hmm.
Like if they're too stupid to know what a consensus is, then they're not being honest. They're not like honestly investigating the situation. They're just trying to say, you can't find the exact word in a paper, therefore you're wrong. It's like they're idiots. They're not worth the time.
I just want you to correct me if I'm wrong. Like at least from an academic journal that I read, right? They give instructions on how to check for consensus. The one example that they gave is like you look at one source and then you find multiple sources which are peer-reviewed. If they all agree on the same thing, then you know that there is some growing consensus on that particular subject. Is that correct?
Sure, yeah. You look at the academic papers, and if the academic papers are tending to go in one direction, that would definitely do it. That takes a lot of work, though. It's easier just to ask, just email a professor, like, is this the consensus?
But what if you can find consensus and then the professor disagrees just because he wants to be dishonest?
It's rare that they do that, but you can always just ask multiple professors.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
You are unserver muted, Millith.
Yeah, hey, I was just wondering if you could explain your moral theory to me.
Morality is a law of physics, undiscovered. We haven't discovered it yet, and it affects brains, causing us to believe and feel certain things. And the ways it causes us to believe is that involuntary imposition of will is wrong, which will lead to, after moral progress, to a conclusion that any involuntary imposition of will is wrong. Anything else?
Well, isn't that just tracking desire satisfaction?
No.
As opposed to morality?
Did you miss like the very first 3 words I said?
Possibly.
Morality is a law of physics that hasn't been discovered yet. It means it was there before any humans. Problem solved.
Okay. Well, what do you mean by morality is a law of physics?
That's a stupid question. When we say gravity is a law of physics, what does that mean in your brain? Like, figure that one out on your own.
Well, it means that we have a mathematical description of how objects move.
Mathematical description of what?
Of how objects, like relative size of things, affects how objects move.
No, that's a stupid answer. That's you have to be an idiot to think that. It describes a thing in nature. There is a thing that exists that causes this pattern.
Right. The thing that exists is the relative size of objects and the curvature of space-time.
Curvature of space-time, yes. So the curvature of space-time,
the objects
thing in nature.
The objects curve the space-time.
Yes, but if there was no curvature of space-time, the size of the objects would be irrelevant. The size of the objects is irrelevant to the cause of gravity. It just happens to be the thing that affects space-time. Space-time, curving space-time, is what causes gravity. There is a thing in nature, curvature of space-time, and that thing objectively exists and causes the phenomenon. That's what it means when you say this is a law of physics. There's a thing in nature and it causes this pattern. So if morality is a law of physics, there is a thing in nature that causes this phenomenon. Whether we can describe it or not doesn't make a difference.
But then that's just an assertion, right? Like,
yes, hence the very second sentence I said, it's undiscovered law of physics. Haven't discovered it yet. Very simple.
It's not very, like.
How is that not simple? What don't you understand about undiscovered law of physics?
Well, I just see no reason to believe that that's the case.
I don't care.
You're not giving me a reason to think that.
I never said you should have a reason to think that. That wasn't part of the explanation. You asked, can I explain my model of morality? That's it.
Yeah, it's just his model.
Okay, well, can you give me a reason to think that morality is an undiscovered law of physics?
I make predictions about how we will discover that the same pattern of morality will be discovered in all species and developed in all species, including AIs and other planets. And if that's discovered to be true, potential explanation would be that it's caused by some undergirding law of physics or some pattern. That would be a reason to believe it if we discovered that. But we haven't discovered it yet, hence the undiscovered part.
So, like, I just find that extremely confusing.
Then pull your head out of your ass.
Yeah, right. Okay. So,
like when
So you're
people
saying
say that
something
that's
like-
extremely confusing, just means they're being stupid. Like what is hard? If there is a consistent pattern through all conscious agents everywhere in the universe, is a possible explanation for that there is some law of physics that governs conscious agents.
right, but we have no evidence.
What I don't give a shit about the evidence. What about that is confusing? Does that make sense? Can your brain process that? If there's
Yes, I can process.
Okay,
I can
so it
process.
does make
It's a
sense.
possible explanation. Yes,
That's
possible.
literally all the answer was. Yes, so it does make sense. It's not confusing. It's very simple.
Yep.
No, but you're conditionalizing on something that there's no evidence to believe.
Hence,
Why would
like,
I?
Like,
why
why
we
are you bringing up a
conditionalizing on
topic
a
that I
person?
literally told you in the second sentence of my answer? It's an undiscovered law of physics. Like the fact whether or not it's discovered was irrelevant to any of the statements I said.
Right, but the reason to think it's a law of physics, right, is that all conscious agents have the same like moral faculties or whatever, right? That's the reason to think
that's a prediction I make that could be discovered in future. That's not a reason to think it now. Undiscovered means there isn't any solid evidence yet. That's literally what undiscovered means. If I had solid evidence, it would not be undiscovered. It would be discovered.
What's the reason to think it now?
I like it.
He explained to you, right? Like he explained to you in simple words. So the topic here was about confusion, but it seems that you will only not be confused if you get the evidence, but you can still understand that without having the evidence. It was simple to understand. Something undiscovered that shapes the progress of species.
Right. I'm just saying, like, in order for me to like take this as like not just like a complete
it's a hypothesis.
mental exercise.
It's not meant to be anything more, hence the undiscovered. So that was already answered in the very first sentence where I answered your question. It's a undiscovered hypothesis. Hasn't been demonstrated yet.
Right, and in the future we'll find that like rocks falling down is objectively morally wrong.
That would be a conclusion of if we found the evidence of the pattern in all conscious agents being the same. That would be the conclusion of what it would lead to.
Right. Okay, so in a talk you had with Alex Malpass, he points out that like your conception of like the best possible world, right, doesn't make sense because it's a world in which all moral decisions are kind of like axed out, right?
No,
because like
Alex Malpass
in
did
the
not
best
take
possible
very
world,
much
I
time.
can't choose.
Stop.
I
No,
can't choose to
stop
punish you.
talking. So that's wrong. Alex Malpass just didn't take very much time to actually think about the implications, like at all. He didn't really think about it at all when he should have, which is why I was upset with him in that conversation. So you can still do moral actions in the best of all possible worlds. Like if I limit myself, say I'm playing a video game, turn the difficulty up really, really high, and I want help. So you help me in a co-op mode. You've done a moral action.
Right, you can do some moral actions, but like a lot of the most impactful moral actions are barred, right? Like I can't punch you in the face.
Unless I
shoot
consent
you.
to it, right? Which is
Right.
good. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. That's not a criticism Alex ever brought against me that would matter. Like, yes, so you can't do the really bad things. Oh no, how bad?
But then that's just like it's like the distinction Alex makes is like freedom from and freedom to, right? So like you're maximizing freedom from, right? But you're minimizing
No.
freedom to.
No, he got that wrong as well.
What do you
So
mean? I don't have the freedom to shoot you in your
that's
best
right.
of all possible world.
You do have the freedom to do other things though, which means I haven't maximized either one. The question is you have maximum freedom to do anything you want to yourself and your property. So I've maximized freedom to yourself and your property, minimized freedom to other people and their property. It's not a maximum minimization of either one. It's a combination of maximizing things that are morally allowed and minimizing things that are immorally allowed, which literally every model of morality does. It's a stupid argument. So yes, you are maximally allowed to do all moral things, and you are minimally allowed to do all immoral things, which is none at all. Congratulations. You've solved morality. Go to heaven.
But you're restricting my freedom too.
I don't care. That is irrelevant. It's like, I think the argument you're trying to make
Then
here is
how
that
are
there's
my
a
decisions
shush,
moral?
shush, shush. So again, morality is just an voluntary assistance of will. So if you voluntarily assist someone else who wants help, you've done a moral thing. Like, problem solved. Like, very easy. This is not hard. I literally just give
Right.
you an
So like,
example.
so it's moral to help
People who consist to be
a
helped.
right. It's moral to help like a drug addict obtain drugs.
If they want drugs and don't want to be harmed in the best of all possible worlds, you can take as many drugs as you want for forever and never be killed. So yes, in the best of all possible worlds, it's perfectly moral to help them get drugs because they can't be harmed by them. Yes, good job.
Right. So then it's moral in our world to do that.
No. What a stupid argument. How does your tiny brain even make the connection that if it's moral in the best of all possible worlds, that means it's necessarily moral here?
Well, I thought what's moral here is what's moral in the best of all possible worlds.
In the best of all possible worlds, a drug addict who will not and does not want to be harmed ever wants drugs. Okay, it's okay to give him drugs because he's not going to be harmed by him. In this world, somebody wants the drugs, they want the high, but to not be harmed. So if you could do that in this world, if you could give them the drugs and give them a way to not be harmed, that would be equally as moral. Yes, correct. But you can't do that in this world. There's a problem there. So yes, in the best of all possible worlds, is it moral to give someone drugs when they can never be harmed by those drugs? Yes, absolutely. Would that exact same scenario also be moral in this world? Yes. Yes, it would. If someone could never be harmed by the drugs, it's perfectly fine to give them the drugs. But that's when you're trying to bring it into this world, you're bringing in the baggage of the damage of the drugs, which is not analogous to the best of all possible worlds. So it's a stupid analogy. Do better.
Well, I'm just wondering how the best of all possible worlds gives us a guide for what's moral in this world. Right? Like, you're saying the best of all possible
again,
worlds.
that's very, very simple. Here is the best we could possibly do. So we get as close as possible given our limitations. We have limitations. Like, the best we could possibly do would be give someone drugs and that don't harm them at all. What's the best we could possibly do? Legalize marijuana. Perfect. Marijuana doesn't do any damage. People want it. They should have it. Bingo. Problem solved. So how do we give people drugs that don't harm them? And that's moral. We should do it here on the earth, like marijuana. Yes, legalize marijuana. There you go. It's very, very simple. This is not even a hard problem. Like, hey, how do we use that as a guide? If the moral thing to do is to give people drugs as long as it doesn't hurt them, hey, here's some drugs that don't hurt people. Let's give it to people. That's a great idea. Moral. Problem solved. Asking the tough questions that could be answered with
No,
5
I'm just
seconds of
asking.
introspection.
I'm asking. Let's not talk about weed. Let's talk about heroin.
Heroin causes damage, so heroin would not be analogous to the answer in the best of all possible worlds, because the answer in the best of all possible worlds is give people drugs when it doesn't cause them any harm. They don't want any harm, and they want the drugs. It's moral to give them to. Yes, absolutely. If they don't want harm and you cause them harm, so like presumably the drug addict does not want to have the negative side effects of the drug, and so if you give them the drug, you're doing a moral thing by giving them the high, but you're doing the immoral thing by giving them the thing they don't want, which is the pain. So it would not be analogous.
Oh, okay. Okay.
This even about drugs? It sounds like you're just asking a question about, like, ought a person be allowed to have poor judgment, and ought they be restrained from exercising poor judgment?
Yeah, like that is more the focus. It's not necessarily about drugs. That's like a good generalization of the question. But like, so like, I'm still very confused about this thing of best of all possible worlds, right? So like, presumably, like, every action I take, right, is both going to be moral and immoral because I'm not doing the thing that would be done if I were the best of all possible worlds, right? So like, again, Malpass brought this up with you. We're like on the train, right?
No. So like if I'm playing a video game, Ninja Gaiden, like today, and I wanted help in co-op and you help me, there would be nothing immoral about that. It would be perfectly moral because I wanted help and you helped me. Problem solved. There was no negative there.
Right, but like let's say I push a kid who's playing with a Lego set off a train track, and they were going to get hit by a train.
Yeah, so if
but
they
their
didn't
will
want to
was
get pushed, that
continue
would be
playing with the
immoral to
Lego
push
set
them.
there.
Yeah, so you've done
Sorry.
one action, which would be both moral and immoral, because you've done something they want, the kid wants to survive, and you've done something they didn't want to get pushed. So there's a small immoral action and a big moral action. You've done them both. Can there be a combination of certain actions that are both? Yes, and that's perfectly fine. Does it mean all actions are? No, clearly not. I just gave you an example of a moral action that doesn't entail any immoral action. So is there combinations? Yes, and that's fine. That's not a problem. It's not an issue.
Well, are you saying that me pushing the kid is both moral and not moral?
Yes, because you've done something they don't want to be pushed, and you've done something they do want to not die, presumably.
Yeah, so I don't see how that's a guide to morality. Like you're basically just giving me a contradiction
No,
and saying like,
again, what is hard about this? So you do the lesser evil. So they presumably want to survive more than they don't want to be pushed. So by pushing them to give them to survive, you've done a greater immoral thing than you have a greater moral thing than immoral thing.
Let's say they don't. Let's say they at that moment they're more interested in playing with the Lego set than pondering whether or not they want to continue living. So like their first order desire is to continue playing with the Lego set, right? So I'm just impinging upon their first order desire. Whether or not we can presume they have a second order desire that they want to continue living, like I don't think that's relevant for the thought experiment, right?
All right, I'm back. What was the question?
So the question is, it seems like you're just saying like, okay, well, there is some more moral, like there's some better action I could have done. Like if I had powers, I could have like stopped the train, right?
Oh yeah, or
So
just made the kid invulnerable or ghost ethereal or whatever. Yeah.
right. But like that's always the case, right?
No.
What do you mean now?
If I'm playing a video game and I want help in co-op with Ninja Gaiden, and you help me, there's literally no better action you could have done. That was it.
Well, I could have hacked the game.
Well, I didn't want you to hack.
I
didn't want you to hack the game. I didn't want you to make it easier. I wanted co-op help. That was it. That is the maximum you could have done to help me. If you had hacked the game, you would have done an immoral action because I didn't want you to hack the game. I could have hacked the game. What I wanted was co-op help. That was it. And you gave it to me.
Then you're just talking about first order desires and not second order desires again, right? So like the kid on the train track.
No.
Right?
No, that is both. That is both because the desire. Stop talking. My desire there isn't to beat the game. That is not there's not like a second order desire there for me beating the game. I could just turn on my hacks and beat the game if I wanted to anytime I want. All of my desires, first order, second order, third order, I just wanted someone to play with and help me with the game. I didn't want to beat the game. There's no other goals there. There's no deeper desires there. That was the full extent of my desire in that moment. I wanted you help to beat the game. And so if you do that, you've done a fully moral action. There was no other thing you needed to do.
Right. Okay, so let's think about the kid on the train track example, right? I said the kid on the train track's first order desire is to play with the Lego set, right? And you said, but we can assume a second order desire that they want to continue living.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So why is that not the case when it comes to playing the video game? Right? So like you're saying your first order desire is to have co-op help, right? But why can I not assume that co-op help also means that you want to beat the game as a second order desire?
Well, you just
and
be
if
wrong.
I help you to achieve the second order, why would that be wrong?
So that would, because I don't want to beat the game. That would be you'd just be wrong.
Okay, that's fine.
Assume that
but that could be the same for the kid.
Desire or
like, be the same for the kid on the train track, right?
Yeah, if the kid wanted to die, then yes, it would be immoral to push him out of the way because he wanted to die. So you would just be wrong.
Okay, so you think like it's okay to let children commit suicide because they're having
again children only applies to pragmatic world, not the best of all possibles. If the best of all possible worlds, a consenting adult wants to die, yes, it's moral to help them die. So if a consenting adult chooses to die and you push them out of the way, force them to live, you've done an immoral action. Children are irrelevancy to the analogy because children are pragmatically intelligently limited, so they're not something that's considered yet.
Well, I thought we had a kid on the train tracks.
It's irrelevant to the analogy. You're adding extra bullshit to make the analogy more complicated when it doesn't need to be. So
that was the initial thought experiment.
No, adding the age and the suicide question, the consent matters to the question. Consent applies to adults with the ability to intellectually consent. If an adult wants to die and you stop them, yes, that is immoral. We don't consider the same problem to children because they don't have the ability to consent. It's an extra variable to the problem, which is just irrelevant to the question. Is it immoral to push someone out of the way if they want to die? If they're not a consenting adult, yeah, it is. Don't push them out of the way.
But what if they're just like in a particularly bad headspace right now, and like if we were to give them a couple
That's
weeks,
their
they would
choice.
not
That's
want
their
to die anymore.
choice, not your choice.
So you
If
think
they
it's
are
still
rational
moral
adults,
to kill them?
yes, their choice, not your choice.
And like surprise parties are immoral.
No, absolutely not. Alex Malpass, again, that was just a stupid argument that made no sense because he just didn't think for a second about the analogy.
Okay, so how is that not immoral?
So again, morality is defined here. Think of it this way. If you get to design your own world and you get to make a list of all actions that you consent to and all actions you don't consent to, everything that you don't consent to is immoral. Everything you consent to is moral. So if you put surprise parties on the things you don't consent to list, then it would be immoral. If you put it on the things you do consent to, then it wouldn't be immoral. Like, this is a very easy problem. This is not an issue. Like, Alex just had his head up his ass here. Like, how is this so hard to understand? If I put surprise parties on my list of things I consent to, even if I don't know they're coming, they're perfectly moral to do.
Yeah, but if I don't want a surprise party and people give me a surprise party, that's immoral.
Yeah. So if you put surprise parties on the things that are immoral in your world, then yes, it would be immoral to make a surprise party for you. Sure.
Right. So it seems like again you're just tracking desire satisfaction, because that most
Things
people
you
would say that has
consent
nothing to
to.
do with
No,
morality.
it has nothing to do with desire
Just
satisfaction. It's
desire
things you
satisfaction.
consent to. So you could consent to things you don't desire. You could non-consent to things you do desire. The desire satisfaction is irrelevant. It's consent. We're tracking consent. So if you consent to have surprise birthday parties, they're moral. If you don't, they're immoral, regardless of your desire. I don't care what you desire. Whether you like it or not is irrelevant. It's whether you consent to it or not that matters.
Wait.
So I can like take things I like donuts. I desire donuts, and I can put them on the list of things I don't consent to, make them immoral. So it's immoral to give me donuts, even though I desire donuts, because I put them on my list of things I don't consent to in my universe.
So in the best of all possible worlds, if you don't consent to a surprise party, no one would be able to throw you one.
Correct.
So their freedom to throw surprise parties is
Again,
just
I already answered that previously. You have freedom to yourself and your property. You do not have freedom over other people or their property. So if you're in Bob's universe, and in Bob's universe, surprise parties are on the immoral list, you can't do a surprise party. Go back to your universe.
Yeah.
You can do one for yourself if you want. I don't care. But in Bob's
I get
universe,
that.
you're not allowed.
I get that, but the morally relevant decisions are the ones that include other people. That's the point.
Yes.
So just saying the best possible world is the one in which you can't make morally relevant decisions is extremely confusing.
That's a very stupid sentence. So again, you can help Bob with anything he wants help with, and those would all be moral actions. Perfectly moral. If Bob wants help with a video game and you help him, you've done a moral action. You can't do the immoral ones in Bob's universe because he turned them off. There's no problem here. Like you can do moral things without the ability to do immoral things. You don't need the ability to do immoral things to do moral things.
Well, you need the ability to do immoral things to make moral decisions.
No.
Yes.
No, that's stupid. Again,
Okay.
you just haven't thought about this. It takes about 5 seconds. I could help someone in the video game, or I could do nothing. So I could do an amoral thing where I do nothing, or I could do a moral thing where I do things to help them. Do I need to be able to punch them in the face for that decision to have a moral significance? No, because there's a third option there called amorality, where there's a 0. So I could do nothing, or I could do moral, even independently of my ability to do immoral. Now, if I had no option, if I could only just do the moral thing and there was no other option, then you're right, there would be no moral significance. But there's a third option there, is amorality, do nothing. So again, stupid argument.
It's not a stupid argument. The whole point is that I'm
A very
in the
stupid
best of all
argument.
possible worlds. I'm limited in the actions I can take, and I'm limited in a way that all of the really morally significant actions, like punching someone or shooting someone,
Wrong.
are just off the table.
Wrong. Again, that's a stupid argument. So I can't nuke a country. I don't have any nuclear weapons. Does that mean my actions are less morally significant? No. No, I can still help people. Does the fact, and so if we limit the level of evil you can do, does that mean the level of good you can do is diminished? No. It's literally irrelevant. It's irrelevant. This is a stupid argument. And so there are lots of evil things that everyone cannot do. There's infinitely many evil things everyone cannot do. Does the fact that there's a limit on the number of evil things you can do have any impact on the significance of the moral things you can do? No, they're completely separate. There is literally no connection in any way to the amount of immoral things you can do to the amount of moral things you can do. They are completely separate entities. This connection you're making of you must be able to do evil things for moral things to matter is just stupid, just insanely stupid.
Well, that's not what I'm saying, though. I'm not saying you must be able to do evil things for every decision to have like some moral calculus on it, right? Like, you're right. Like, I could choose to help you in a video game, and you could consider that moral because it's helping assist your desire, your consent or whatever, right? And that would not be in any way limited by my inability to punch you. Like, I'm fine with that, right? But what I'm saying is that the fact that you're saying the best of all possible moral worlds is the one in which a lot of the most important moral decisions are just off the table, right?
What
is
is that? Wait,
confusing.
stop. That doesn't make any sense. What do you mean off the table? So, like, if I designed a world
I
exactly
can't.
like, if I designed a world exactly like this one, I consent to make my world exactly like this one with rape and murder and stuff or whatever. You could still do all of the same actions to help people in this world. They would just have to consent to being a part of it in the first place. Maybe they don't want they consent to be in this world, but they still have preferred actions and non-preferred actions, and so their desires are to not be raped, even though they've consented to be a part of this world. And so even though you can still then save them from being raped or whatever, and you've done a moral action. Congratulations. The same actions, literally all of the same actions, can be done in the best of all possible worlds that can be done here. The only difference is it can only happen to people who've consented to it. There's literally no issue there.
But so the person can't choose to rape someone who hasn't consented to it.
So like there's a
The
world
rapist.
where rape is allowed and the rapists enter that world. And there are people who are like, you know what? I kind of want to be in that world just to experience or whatever. And they can enter that world and potentially be raped. And so if there's a world that allows it and people consent to enter this world fully well knowing that this is a thing that happens, will happen to them or whatever, then you can also enter and stop those things from happening. So there's no off the table here, and it's just irrelevant. Again, like if I could,
You're talking about some specific world, not the best of all possible worlds.
oh my god,
Because in the best of all possible worlds, the rapist
stop.
can't
So the best of all possible worlds, every person gets their own world that they can design however they want. You get to make the rules of your own world. Hitler has a world, rapists have a world, you have a world, and you set the rules. And people can visit your world, but they have to consent to all of your rules. Are you with me?
I think you could maybe clarify it by calling it like the most free or autonomous set of all possible worlds, to clarify that it's a set of worlds and they're maximally free. And so it's clear that you're not just talking about a single world, and you're talking specifically about the kind of good that's implicit in freedom.
Well, there's maximum freedom from, there's not maximum freedom to in those worlds.
I don't care about those. Those are relevant.
That's fine. You can just say it's irrelevant, but you're not maximizing freedom, quote unquote.
I'm maximizing morality, not freedom. I don't care about freedom. I care about
not freedom
morality.
too. Morality is consisted of both freedom from and freedom to.
No, well, sort of, but that's irrelevant. So morality is like voluntary assistance of will. Immorality is involuntary imposition of will, and there's both of those are entailed. Like you can, it's like they're entailed of lots of things. So divided into some kind of arbitrary distinction between freedom from and freedom to, like, okay, you can divide it from actions that go up and actions that go down. I don't care. That's irrelevant. The fact that you can subdivide the two categories of morality in other ways that are irrelevant to morality, I don't care. Like, okay, it's irrelevant. Like
I don't
so
see.
in the best of all possible worlds, you don't have the freedom to blow up another person's universe. Okay. So
So I'm not maximally free.
right, I don't care. I never said you were maximally free. I don't care.
I was just talking to IX, who said
Yeah, he
it's
clarified that free's
it's
not
the set
the
of
word.
all possible worlds which maximize freedom, right? And I'm just saying it's not that.
Yeah,
Right.
so I used the wrong word. What he's saying is non-coercion, not just freedom in general, right? Because he's
Right. I
emphasizing
understood. I
freedom
understood
from.
your conversation with X. My point is that you keep bringing up this distinction between freedom to and freedom from or whatever, and it's just irrelevant. So I'm asking you the relevancy of you keep bringing up this analogy. Yes, you don't have maximum freedom to do anything you want. Yes, good job. Congratulations. That's not what morality is. Morality is freedom to do what you want to yourself and your property, not to anyone.
No, morality is the potential to do harmful things to other people and choosing not to do so.
No, that's
That's
stupid.
morality.
That's literally stupid. So I could
Okay.
punch you in the face, but I haven't done it. Have I done a moral action? No, that's a stupid thing to say.
What?
Your definition was, you said morality is the ability to do harm to others but choosing not to. That's stupid.
No, sorry. That's I misspoke. If that's what I said. So, one of the components of morality, presumably, is the ability to do harm to people but choosing not to. Right? Like that's just one of the components. It's a necessary condition or something like that.
No, it's a relevant condition. Like there are an infinite number of possible moral actions, most of which you can't do. Does that matter to morality? No. Like you can't go back in time and save Giordano Bruno from being burned at the stake. You can't do it. Does that mean that morality is somehow broken because you can't do every possible moral action? No. There is no rule that says you must be able to do all possible moral actions for morality to be valid. Like, no, we don't care. So are there some that you can't do? Yes, and that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine that you were unable to do all possible logical moral actions.
Oh, well, I don't know. Like, I don't think I was saying anything about the possibility of doing all logical moral actions or whatever, right? What I was saying is that it seems like if your definition of morality, right, doesn't like allow for me to choose between the right action and the wrong action, right? Then, like, again, you're not tracking morality as I understand it, right? Like, at least like the folk concept of morality, right? Because if I don't have the option to choose the wrong action, right? If all my actions are just moral or amoral, right? Then I don't think I'm really making like moral decisions, quote unquote. I don't think I'm really given the like the moral space to operate, right? Because the immoral action's off the table. I know you say it's not off the table, but I don't understand how you're
Oh
excluding
yeah.
it. All you're
So
doing
immoral actions are off
all
the
you're
table.
doing is
Right.
referencing some
I agree.
specific world where certain things may not be on or off the table,
Oh,
right?
no. So
your
I
whole point
agree.
is
I
the
agree with
best
your
of all
statement there
possible.
that all immoral actions are off the table. Yes, which is fine. This is not a problem. I don't see why you think this is a problem. Like it seems like you have this hyper stupid idea that you need to be able to do immoral actions for things to be significant. No, that is wrong. That is stupid. There's no logical consistency there.
For choices to be significant.
Yeah, that's stupid.
For moral choices to be
That's literally
significant.
stupid. That's a
Okay.
stupid argument. Hey, let's say I can have a moral choice. I can help you with your video game. Have I done a moral action? Yes. Is that morally significant? Yes. That's why it's labeled a moral action. If it's a moral action, it is by definition morally significant. Could it be more morally significant? Yes, there are logical ways to make things more morally significant, like saving you from being blown to bits by Ultron. Does that mean that the action of me helping you play a video game is not morally significant? No. You've just listed a bigger option that has more moral significance. And if we take those off the table, that is irrelevant to the moral significance of the small ones. This is the question I answered before. I can't nuke a country. Does that invalidate the moral significance of the small actions I can do? No. So if I eliminated all the moral actions, does that in any way impact the moral significance of the moral actions I can do? No. No, it doesn't. There is
I
literally
agree
no
with you. There are
connection.
some categories. There's some categories of moral action you can do in your best of all possible worlds. What I'm saying is that a lot of the categories of what we would consider in the folk concept of morality, moral action, are off the table
I
completely.
literally just answered this. Like
So you didn't.
let me try to walk you through this analogy. I can't nuke a country right now. I don't have a nuke. I can't nuke a country. That is off the table. Does that matter? No. There are things that are off the table right now. There is an edge of the table, and nuking countries is off the edge of the table. It's off the table. I can't do it. And there are infinitely many things. Snapping my fingers and Thanosing half the population, off the table. Can't do it. There are infinitely many immoral actions that are off the table that I cannot do, and moral actions. There are infinitely many moral actions that are off the table that I cannot do, like going back in time and saving people, stopping the Holocaust. There are infinitely many moral actions and infinitely many immoral actions that are off the table. If we make the table a little smaller and put some more actions out there, it doesn't matter. No impact, irrelevant. There are already an infinitely many number of things off both edges of the table, and I want to make the table a little smaller so you can't do the immoral things, or maybe like that, maybe like that way. That's fine. There's no problem here. Like your complaint, it seems like your complaint is that, well, look at all the things that are off the table, and there's just, and you're saying that if I move the table a little closer, that adds a couple over there that typically that are morally significant in our pragmatic world. Congratulations, great job. I don't care. Or maybe let's think about it this way. Think about a world where Thanos existed. We actually had Thanos powers. And somebody was like, maybe we shouldn't have Thanos powers. Maybe that's immoral. Maybe we make the world like the earth that we live in as humans. And you could be like, oh, but that damages the moral significance because I can't Thanos people with my ultimate stones of power. And so it's just the moral significance is just gone from this world because I can't Thanos people. And that would be a stupid argument. Stupid argument for the exact same
Yeah, I
reason.
agree. That would be stupid, but that's not what I'm saying.
That is what you're saying.
No, it's not.
So in this analogy, the Thanosing is analogous to what you're saying about what makes something a morally significant. Okay, good.
Yeah, I get the analogy. Okay, so
1 sec, I got to get a snack from downstairs. You guys can keep talking though, Ix and Amy here.
Yeah, you can talk to us while he's doing stuff. So, Millith, what's your primary point? Like, I know you guys were talking about his moral system, but do you have a particular framework for meta ethics or something that you think is the right one, or do you think it's underdetermined?
Like, I don't know. Like, I would say I'm probably closest to like an emotivist. When it comes to ethical statements, right? Like, I don't think there is like I don't think there are like objective moral facts in any meaningful way.
Are you familiar with quasi-realism?
What does that mean?
Yeah, you can still be an emotivist and believe there are moral facts.
Yeah.
So quasi-realism is sometimes thought of as being related or a kind of emotivism, but quasi-realism is basically just acknowledging that there is at least a real component in people's moral prescriptions, which is the situation. You wouldn't arbitrarily have two different prescriptions for the identical situation. So at least the individual is saying this prescription calls for this. This situation calls for this prescription, right? And
yeah, that's fine. Like if you're saying there's something like hypothetical norms as opposed to categorical norms, that's fine.
Right, but the reason, to me, it seems like we engage in moral realist language the same way we engage in teleonomy as biologists, which is to say, we understand perfectly well that when we say that, like the jungle designed the animals camouflage so they would be able to blend in, we don't literally mean that the jungle is like drawing animals and like making sick leaf patterns on them because it plans ahead of time. We use those words in a kind of a shorthand for the complicated explanation, which is just say there's selection against animals which do not have the right kinds of characteristics to survive in cases where visual camouflage would be advantageous. They're going to have it or they're going to die eventually, or they're going to have to be able to get by without it for some reason, like flying or something.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just you're not equivocating univocally. We do that all the time, right? Like where like
Yeah,
we'll say something like this is
really meaning.
Right, the jungle designed it, right? But we don't mean like designed in the same way we mean a computer is designed, right? It's just the
Yeah.
non-univocal
Right.
non-univocal predication. Like that's very cool.
Right. So what quasi-realism is saying is that it's okay to sort of act like a moral realist for the sake of everyday discussions of morality, even if you're technically some kind of error theorist or emotivist about moral facts being like
Facts.
having truth value, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem like talking as though I'm a moral realist, unless someone wants to bring up metaethics, in which case I think it's underdetermined. Like I don't think there is um, a way to settle the disputes, because it seems to me like what people are actually doing is kind of like jurisprudence, where they look at all the case law and all the precedent and all the constitutional issues and all the considerations for consequential impact, and like making a law is like looking at every possible consideration, and that's essentially all admissible in court, so to speak, when people make a moral judgment. They could use any kind of metaethical combination depending on what they think is appropriate for the situation or what ideas they have. It's going to be a mess, but all of it is like a part of moral discourse, but none of it is conclusive to me, in the same way that there's a lot of like underdetermined physical theories where we just don't know what the correct answer is, but we know how to get like numerical results that work.
Yeah, so like when it comes to very complex composite objects, right? Like humans, right? There's a lot of like in a lot of different fields, right? There's a lot of like what's called like coarse graining over insignificant facts to talk about the significant facts, right? So like whether or not we have free will, right? It still makes sense to talk about humans at like a legal level as if they have free will.
Yeah.
Whether or not uh yeah, like so like yeah, so there's just tons of that stuff for sure. But I agree with you. Like it is there's use in coarse graining over insignificant aspects when you're wanting to focus on like the composite object itself as opposed to the composite
Right.
construct or
Like
whatever.
yeah, like in the case of the free will thing, the person you're speaking to may be like in their own head using a different sense of choice than you are when you say choice. I might just mean like a like an agent originated determination or deliberation of like control over its own actions. But I don't mean that determinism has any bearing on it either way, or that like there's alternate possibilities or not. I'm just agnostic on those questions because the physics isn't really a settled issue, right? Or someone who's metaphysical about it could think that there's some other spooky way of explaining it, or panpsychism, or I don't know what. Point is that could just all be underdetermined, but we could still have a functional agreement on what we mean as a Venn diagram like intersect between our two disparate ideas about the thing. And that's what I do with moral talk, right? It's like, okay, you have your metaethics. We can talk about metaethics a little bit, but at the end of the day, we're still going to be able to have a uh, like a normative discussion, regardless of the metaethical stuff, unless one or the other party makes it an issue and like sort of is like, oh, you don't have objective morality, blah blah blah, which theists do a lot, but like most people who are not annoying fundamentalist theists don't do that.
Well, there's just different ways we could talk about morality, right? Like we can say like, do moral facts have truth values, right? Or we could say something like, um, is it the case that like we have conventions in law and in just everyday interaction such that like certain things are in like the folk concept, certain things are considered moral and certain things are considered immoral, right? And like we can talk about those normative values. Like it's just a different just a different conversation than the conversation about truth value with respect to ethical statements or propositions.
Yeah, and it's more about satisficing, like in the same way that there are convergent evolutionary patterns, like there are competencies like flight, competencies like motors, like legs, like a whole bunch of capabilities that result in convergent body plans in totally disparate species. There's like many versions of crabs, many versions of common mammal body patterns that have no common ancestor. So in that same sense, there's I hate to use the term because his book didn't really like do a good job of explaining it, but there can be thought of as a moral phase space, dare I say, a moral landscape, like Sam Harris tried to describe it as, right? Although he sort of tried to simplify it as like highs and lows, which is maybe like missing a couple of the dimensions that it actually needs to be described adequately. But the phase space is just like an evolutionist. There's a range of viable options, and if you have three people who all have like successful societies, they're going to all say that their system is moral, and they're going to have differences that are going to just be sort of trivial in the sense that they're not a deal breaker within their given context, but which in the other person's context might be really objectionable because it just for some reason is outside of their norms. But you could just say, in their context, all three are successfully meeting all the needs of their inhabitants. Seems to be very contextual.
Well, yeah, but so again, like there, you're not talking about objective morality, right? You're just talking about like how certain moral systems can be objectively thought to be more or less useful to a society, right? Or like how
What
all
I'm
three of them, as you said, could be thought to be successful in their context or whatever, right? But like
what I'm
again, that's just a different question.
not exactly. So here's the thing. So like ethical naturalists try to ground morality in something like natural facts, right? And T-Jump's morality may or may not have an element of kind of ethical naturalism to it, in the sense that he grounds it in some kind of physics or something. But even if you think that in like the evolution example, that there's going to be like no fact of the matter about what the perfect species is, for instance, there's still going to be uh, there's going to be physical structural constraints on what a given species' success or failure is going to be given the context they're in, like their competition, their environment, etc. Right? So we use natural science to describe and model the success and failure of organisms. And I think we can do something similar to that eventually when we put everything on the table of all the like what are all the facts about a given sort of moral context in
Yeah,
which
like I'm not sure I'm disputing um like anything really that you're saying. Like the only thing for me is that like it seems like you're just saying like there are hypothetical norms, right? Like uh organisms want to survive and pass on their genes, right?
yeah.
So like when we have hypothetical norms, there are better or worse strategies to accomplish said norms, right? Like I don't know if I disagree with that. That's fine. But the talk of morality is talk of objective norms, right? Like it's not talk of hypothetical norms. So like think about like
That's
chess, right? Like if you're playing chess, right, then like presumably there are like objectively better openings, like or like better responses to certain openings or whatever, right? Like if your goal is to win a game of chess. But
Have you ever
that
heard of Cornell realism?
no, no. But
Okay,
that
so
doesn't tell you anything about like whether you ought to value winning a game of chess, right? Like that would be a hypothetical norm, right? So like that's the talk of morality and ethics is usually at the hypothetical norm level, not the sorry, not the hypothetical at the universal norm level, not at the hypothetical norm level. Because like I don't know, like maybe there are like some rule following paradox stuff about like about hypothetical norms, right? But like I don't know, like I'm not here to argue about like whether there are better or worse objective strategies, like with regards to success, in the context of a hypothetical norm. Like there
what
might
I'm
be, there
getting at
might
is
not be.
that the facts that determine whether something is or isn't meeting some hypothetical norm can all be natural facts, right? And the only thing which is the ought that's in dispute about whether it counts as like a meta ethic is the initial one, like the you desire to survive or you desire to do whatever, right? So the that's kind of what quasi-realism is saying, is that like there's a large portion of moral discourse which is natural. And if you look at biology, you look at like how we model the survival of organisms, it's complex and messy, and there isn't a single stable solution to all possible environments, because the whole point is that you're contextually fitted to the environment you're in, right? So like moral relativism purports to say that what it means to be moral is like to be acceptable within your like your context. Like to be good is to be in accord with your society or something like that, which sounds unsatisfying because it doesn't feel like it's saying much. It feels like it's just saying, go with the flow or something like that, right? But it's kind of like
Can I just
in
interject right there really quick? So like there are tons of different moral relativist schemes, right? Like you're just
yeah,
talking about like cultural relativism or something like
yeah,
that, right? But that's not moral relativism. Okay.
yeah. Maybe I misspoke. Hold on a second. Okay. Well, they are. I mean, cultural relativism does kind of fall into the moral relativist category because it's still talking about a particular standpoint. It's just saying the standpoint is the culture, right? So yeah, there are other ways of doing moral relativism.
Also, if you're a theist, please feel free to put your hand up and tell us why you think God exists.
Yep.
But also, what's up, X?
Hey, Amy. It's good to be here.
Mm-hmm. I like the conversation. I didn't want to interrupt, just wanted to also try and bait theists too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so anyway, my point is that in the same sense that like in nature, you wouldn't expect there to be a perfect evolutionary strategy because it's all it's relative to a context. I don't think it makes sense for there to be categorical norms in the long term because whatever environment those norms are appropriate for is going to be antiquated at some point by new and changing environmental conditions. Like independent of anyone, like just feeling different about things will be different. So people will have to have new feelings about situations that just never occurred before.
I don't quite follow. So like there's absolute morality and relative morality where like there's one principle that is true across all time or whatever. But you could have a contingent model of morality that's still categorical so that it changes over time, but it could still be that there's some objective principle there that would be true, even though it changes to fit some situation or something.
Yeah, and I really like non-coercion myself, and I think it is something which across a wide range of changes in the environment holds up as a good principle. So I'm sympathetic to that being one of, potentially part of what that core set would be that we would find to be most universally agreeable.
Well, I was going a little further than that. I was saying, like, say there's like a god who wrote morality and he just changes his mind every 5 minutes. But murder is wrong. Murder is totally fine. Murder that dude. That could still count as a categorical imperative to do what God says or whatever.
Yeah, there's an underlying system and everything else is within that system, sure.
I had a question.
Okay.
Yeah. It's funny you two started talking about drugs. I was going to ask you, T-Jump, if you had a position on drug legalization,
Yeah.
like a practical position.
All of it. Legalize.
Okay.
Legalize. What was it?
All of them.
I think there's like 6 countries that decriminalized everything. I would be for going further than that and installing what Canada did with what are they called, the safe drug sites or whatever.
The most successful Portugal, and I was actually in Canada when they did that, at least in Western Canada, and I walked into some of those places because I thought they were like a nice like a CVS drugstore or something. So they're so brightly lit and inviting. Walked into this place like, oh, would you like a needle? I'm like, oh no, what the hell is this place? And I walked right back out. But the reason Portugal's worked well relative to say Portland is that in Portugal, they had a very successful treatment program that was proven to work and to scale. The treatment program was super successful before they legalized. When they legalized, they were just making the treatment program the replacement for illegality, and that worked. They went from most drug crisis country in Europe to lowest drug problems in Europe. And Portland didn't do that. Portland was like, let's just say we legalized it, and they had no program ready to go, and so they have like a huge class of people dying of fentanyl on the streets, and there's no like combined program. So you can do
So
it right, you can do it wrong.
it's legalization and an alternative. Need both of those.
Yeah, people need medical care and help if they have a drug problem to make their own freely chosen like recovery from it.
Yeah, something that I thought was interesting about. By the way, I don't think we'll have any like substantive disagreements, so we could clear the floor if we want to have more of a debate. But just real quick, an interesting thing to look at with Portugal is the instances of I think like HIV or like other diseases transmitted typically through like contaminated needles. Those decreased significantly.
Yeah,
so
all
great
fatalities decreased.
in
Like
healthcare.
overdoses decreased. Needle disease spread. Everything got better. If you do it right, it works. But you have to do it right. You can't just half-ass it like Portland did it.
For sure.
Same with the coat hangers and abortions. Like if it's legal and there are safe ways to do it, then you have less deaths and damage caused by having to do it in less safe ways.
Amen. On basically the entire conversation.
What is up, Dirt?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Copy.
Okay, I'm in. Okay. Hey, so I'm an atheist. I don't have any objection. I'm not going to like argue for God, but I was listening to the conversation about morality a little while ago, and I have some questions, and I feel like I have an objection, but I just want to get a little clarity on the idea.
Okay.
So first of all, it sounds like this is for T-Jump. So basically, you're framing it as it's a scientific theory. It makes testable predictions. It's falsifiable.
Yep.
That's correct.
Yep. Yes, that is correct.
Testing? Okay. And so basically, what would falsify it if it makes incorrect predictions about moral intuition?
Sort of. So like if they get it wrong, the fact that moral intuition progresses in the same way for all species and AI all throughout the universe, that would falsify it.
Okay. So like, if we observed over the next 100 years that people started favoring ideas that are regressive to what we currently understand in terms of like imposition of will, like if people started
that would be
favoring slavery,
that would not be enough, because I'm using the history of like hundreds of thousands of years of human development. So it would be more something like if AI was developed and AI said morality is drowning babies or something, that's all it did and it never improved or whatever. As long as it wasn't directly programmed to do that, then that would falsify the theory. So because my theory is if AI is developed or any conscious agent is developed, given development technology, intelligence resources, it will all develop a morality that is something similar to my model. So if AI didn't do that, then that would go against my model.
Okay, so basically, you're saying that there's something in external objective reality that stands in causal relation to our intuitions, and that's causing us to intuit it in the way we do, and that is increasing over time. Like our access to it is getting better.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you say it's objective because if any individual disagrees with it, they're wrong. They don't get a say in it.
Well, it's objective because it's governed by some feature of reality that is independent of opinion. So because of that, if they disagree, they're wrong. So like if you say the sun is like only 6,000 years old, or the earth is only 6,000 years old, you're wrong because it corresponds to something in reality.
Let's see. But why can't I have a moral perception that's more accurate than anyone else? Like, and if I'm able to more accurately perceive, I can?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the ability for some people to be wrong would also imply that other people would be more right.
Wait, can you say that again?
The implication that if some people can be wrong, that means other people can be right. So as long as the thing that determines morality is independent of opinion, some
Oh,
people
okay,
can have
okay.
opinions that are more right and more wrong.
Okay. So when you say it's objective, you're saying there's a thing that's objective, and your current like model of it is that it's imposition of will. It's possibly that there could be a delta between that description and what actually is objective.
Sure.
Okay. So if some small amount of people disagreed with it, that would not falsify the theory. You would just say that they are misperceiving. But if but if like a cosmologically significant percentage of people over time disagreed with it, that would falsify the theory.
Yeah, like so right now the body of evidence I'm using is the progress of humanity over the course of all recorded history. And so if there was, we went for longer than that, longer than all of recorded history, and it started going the opposite direction, then there would be more evidence against it than for it or something like that. Sure.
Okay, that clears that up for me. I have a couple other questions. This theory, when you say that how did you encounter did you come up with this theory in relation to this trend? Like, did you observe the data first and
Yes.
then come up with a theory?
Yes.
Okay. So as a matter of theoretical virtue, do you grant that that's less virtuous than if you had come up with a theory and then the data had then come up after that?
No. Like
Right,
if
there's a difference between
if I came up with a theory, made testable predictions, and then discovered the data, that would be better. But what matters
Okay.
isn't the order you discovered the data. So like if it was already known by a lot of people and I create up a theory and it happens to meet the data everybody already knows, well, who cares? It's irrelevant. What matters is
Okay.
if
I'm saying it does matter as a matter of theoretical virtue, because that
not
could
really.
be a tiebreaker between two theories, all else being equal.
Not really. So like if the data is already known, just not by you, and you came up with a theory that happens to match the data,
Sure.
we don't care. It's irrelevant. You can make up, there are infinitely many hypotheses that can all fit the data. We don't care about that. What matters is if you can fit the data and then predict future data we don't know yet and get that right. That's the virtue we're looking for. Can you predict new data we haven't discovered yet and get it right? It's the methodology and science of hypothesis building is when you start with data, build a model, and then the confirmation is when you make predictions about new data and get it right. That's the part that matters. We don't really care about
And all I'm saying is you're not claiming to have done that here.
No.
Okay.
Then I wouldn't have said it would be undiscovered. I'd say it's been discovered. Here's the data. Eat my balls.
Okay. You don't have any categorical norm in your theory.
Depends what you mean.
There's no ought. There's no categorical imperative. There's no blanket. You ought to do good.
Yeah,
You
so
ought
there's
to.
no-
You
there's
ought
no-
to not impose on
Yeah,
will.
oughts are something that we add in after the fact, but categorical and normative can be applied to more things than just oughts.
I'm only talking about categorical oughts.
So yeah,
I'm just asking.
yeah,
what
there's
you
no
claim. So,
oughts. Yeah, no oughts. Categorical and normative.
well, there you might have hypothetical.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so you
hypothetical
wouldn't
oughts
have
are fine.
either hypothetical or
Is it working now?
categorical.
Yeah, hold on a
Because-
second. We're in the middle of
yeah.
someone else.
Yeah, so we have hypothetical imperatives like I want chocolate, therefore I should go to the store and buy chocolate. But I don't. That's irrelevant to objective morality, though. So,
Right. Okay. They're not. You may have them, but they're not entailed by your theory.
I guess so. Yeah, they're not relevant.
Okay. Now let's see. So, do you think you could apply the same logic that you've used with your theory to derive categorical oughts? So, in other words, like
I mean,
if-
like so you could
if
possibly,
it were the case,
possibly like if you look at the data and have a hypothesis that there are categorical oughts out there or something, and then make predictions based off of those and they come to be correct. Sure.
Well, I think there is. Well, I don't know. Maybe, yeah. If it were the case that people had agreement about what is categorically correct in terms of oughts, and that was increasing over time and going in a certain direction, that would be a way to say that those oughts are objective.
As a hypothesis, sure, you can come up with any hypothesis you want, fits a pattern, and then make predictions. Sure.
Okay, but then if that's the case, then that would be a way to get an ought from an is.
I think that's a separate problem, but sure. Like, what matters is if you can confirm it with novel predictions. So if you can build a model of categorical oughts or magical farting leprechauns and it makes predictions and gets it right, then that's evidence of whatever you want. So if you have a hypothesis of round squares and it makes predictions about what's going to happen in the universe and it gets them right, that's evidence of round squares.
Okay, so you're disagreeing with an established, I guess, an uncontroversial stance in philosophy that you can't get an ought from an is.
No, that's a separate question. So,
well,
like,
I just
if you
asked if
say
you can.
there are oughts or whatever, and you want to say the oughts will entail this kind of consequence in the universe and make predictions about it, and you get it right, then yeah, you can have evidence of an ought from things you discover, but that would not be answering the question how you got an ought from an is, because the ought is problem, the is ought problem is stating how an ought is derived from a set of is statements. But epistemologically, if you're just saying, I think oughts exist, and the evidence of these oughts would be this set of is statements that we can discover, that's a separate thing. That isn't answering the is ought question. You're not saying, here is how we derived an ought from a set of is statements. You're saying, this is an ought statement, and evidence of this ought statement is these is statements. It's not the same thing.
Wait, when you say derive,
Yeah.
that just means epistemically justify.
No, it means ontologically entail. So the is ought problem is saying that, like, how do we get chemistry from physics? Well, physics you can literally take and derive chemistry. Like, it is literally a consequence of physics that we get chemistry. The is ought problem is trying to do the same thing. How do you get the chemistry of an ought from the physics of an is? They're trying to find an ontological connection between the ises and the oughts, and it can't be done. It's not an epistemic
Okay,
question.
but you claim an ontological connection between something in objective reality and our moral intuitions.
Yes.
Yeah, and I can use the same exact logic to get an ontological connection between something in objective reality and a categorical imperative.
That's irrelevant to the is ought question. So the is ought question is like you could say there is something in reality that causes our sensations of oughts. That would be fine. That one, everyone's fine with that. But if you're saying that there is ontologically some set of ises that derives an ontological ought, that's the is ought problem. So if you just want to use the same method I'm using, you could say that there's some set of physics or something that causes our feelings of oughtness. Yeah, 100% agreed. Go for it, whatever. But that wouldn't be solving the is ought problem, because the is ought problem isn't about what causes our feelings of oughts. It's saying what oughts actually are.
But in your model of morality, you're making a stronger claim than saying that which exists in objective reality causes our moral intuitions. You're saying that actually causes morality.
So I think you got it backwards here. So I'm saying morality is a thing. That's true. And the thing of morality is what's causing our moral intuitions. Sure.
Yeah. But when you say this is morality is imposition of will, I think you mean that both as a definition and also as a truth claim.
Well, that would be like saying gravity is F over G, whatever the equation is. The description is simply describing the way nature is. It's not, the description itself isn't a thing. It's not like the description itself is morality.
No, but you're saying the thing in objective reality, whatever that is morality.
Yes.
Yeah. So, so if you can say that, then why can't I say that there's if I use the same logic, that there's a thing in objective reality that causes our intuition about categorical norms, and make that as a stronger claim than it's not just the intuition, it's the thing itself.
Yeah, you can say that perfectly fine. There's no problem with that. It just doesn't solve the is-ought problem.
If I can arrive at an ontological entailment.
Again, you would need to show an entailment from the is statements to some kind of ought statement, not an epistemic relationship of I believe there is an ought and here's some evidence for it. And so it's a different problem than the epistemic one. My methodology is just epistemic. I'm not showing some kind of necessary derivative of how this law of physics interacts with our brains to produce morality. I'm not answering that question. That's not a question I'm answering. Whereas the is-ought problem, in order to answer it, that's the question you would have to answer is how do you derive an ought from these set of ises, not epistemically justify an ought based on ises.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Except that I think that what just doesn't make sense is that it seems that in your theory, you make both an epistemic justification as well as an ontological entailment.
Yes, but I don't claim there's an is-ought. There's no oughts, so I don't have to solve the is-ought problem.
Yeah. But if your justification, if you can arrive at both an ontological entailment and an epistemic justification using your reasoning, then I don't see why I can't do the same thing for the is-ought. But I don't know.
I derive our intuitions by there is a law of physics like gravity that literally physically interacts with our brains. So that's how my moral thing interacts with our brains to produce intuitions. So that is the analogous part that you're trying to infer in yours about the is-ought problem. You won't be able to say there is an ought that interacts with our brains physically by means of some physical law to produce our intuitions. Therefore, that's a solution to the is-ought problem. That would not work. So my solution is just here is a law of physics that interacts with our brains like every other law, and it causes these intuitions. Therefore, there is an ontological thing of morality. If you're trying to solve the is-ought problem that way, you're going to have to try to figure out how to make oughts a law of physics or something, and then explain how that law of physics interacts with our brains in such a way to produce intuitions. Now you could just do the second part. There's a law of physics that interacts with brains. All right, what is an ought law of physics? Doesn't make any sense.
All right, thanks. I feel like I'm gonna have to process and think about this. So you give me some stuff to think about. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Tatsui, are you there?
I'm always there, bro.
Okay, what have you got for us?
Let's just say for the past few weeks, I've been looking around and seeing this stage. And T-Jump, I got a question to ask. Do you condemn Israel for the many war crimes they've been doing on Palestine?
Sure.
Well, then why were you here? Are you pro-Israel or pro-Palestine?
More pro-Israel, probably.
Why is that?
Because Israel isn't the one who's launching rockets first. They didn't massacre a bunch of people like Hamas did. They didn't elect Hamas into a government.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, well, looking at the graphs, looking at the stats, looking at everything that we have on hand, looking at the fact that they bombed many hospitals, we can definitely know that they've killed more people and that have been doing more war crimes.
So what T-Jump said is not who killed the most people, because you're referring to something that's orthogonal to what he said. What he said is that if someone initiates violence, in other words, someone starts.
Why don't you let him speak, bro? Let him speak.
He's answering the question correctly. He's answering the question correctly.
Is he a prophet? Let him speak for himself. Why do you have to say that?
Goodbye. Next.
Maybe you could,
all right.
I was thinking maybe he could try again. As to what you'd actually said.
He's a potato. He's an intellectual potato.
Can I steel man his argument?
Sure, go for it.
All right, cool. I think the point that he was trying to make is that history didn't begin on October 7th, and that the things that Israel has done beforehand has sort of led to this hatred, this simmering hatred that like blew up on October 7th. How do you respond to that?
It's just not true. Like the Middle East has hated Israel since way before they got Israel. Like there's been multiple wars started by Muslims against Israel before they did anything. So it's just false.
Well, I mean, they moved there, right? I mean, it was
that was
it was
Britain.
typically
That was
like-
Britain who did that. That's not Israel's fault.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's not,
it's like
not the Jews'
I would be
fault.
100% for Palestinians being angry at Britain. 100%. Yes, go for it. Being angry at Israel doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I think the relevant comparison is, what would America do if we like put Palestine into Mexico, like a border of the US, and they started launching rockets into America or China or Russia or North Korea? What would those countries do compared to what Israel is doing? Now, going based off of history, if you launch rockets into America, your country is gone. You lose. We're going to invade, we're going to kill all your leaders, and we're going to leave and let you figure it out for yourself. That's worse than what Israel is doing. If you launched rockets into China, you would be mass murdered. You'd just be gone. No more your country. It would be a part of China, like what was it? The Buddhist countries that they took over.
Wait,
You would
but,
be
like,
Kurdish wiped out. So
sure. I mean,
comparatively, like I grant, yeah, Israel's doing a lot of immoral things, 100%, no problem there. But comparatively to any other developed nation with that kind of firepower, what they're doing is significantly more minor than what any other power would do in that situation. And so I think condemning Israel for being essentially the least bad power to do stuff doesn't make any sense.
I
think there is some condemnation that should go Israel's way, just because
Sure.
like the far right in Israel, like the Netanyahu party, right? Like they made a conscious decision to work with Hezbollah and like kind of triangulate them against the PLO.
Well, again,
like in
that
the
part,
2000s.
same thing. Is it bad? Yes. Would America have done it worse? Yes. Would China have done it worse? Yes. So, like, does America use terrorist organizations like what's his name, 9/11 guy, to counter other organizations? Yes. Literally, it's just a staple of government. They all do that. So again, I think that you need to look at Israel comparatively. What are they doing relative to any other power country that would be in the same situation doing, and is it better or worse comparatively?
Well, so like I don't disagree with you, T-Jump, at all. I think you're mostly right on your assessment. I would just say that like there are things they have been doing lately under the Netanyahu regime that have been more provocative than I would like to see as a Jewish Canadian, right? So like they have been expanding the settlements in the West Bank against international law. They have been, right? So like there's things that the Netanyahu government has done that I think are not conducive to a lasting peace.
Can I jump in?
But that's not to excuse anything. Like I think your assessment of like the history of like the 48 war and the 67 war and stuff, like Israel acted a lot more responsibly during those wars than a lot of other countries would have. Like they gave back territory that they won.
Yeah, they
like,
conquered
fair
like all of the northern part of Africa and just gave it back.
Exactly. They just gave it back, right? So like there's like they've been pretty responsible historically. I'm just not sure that like there is a large right-wing movement that's kind of ascendant now. Well, descendant maybe after the protests and whatever, but like was ascendant, and I put some of the blame on that right-wing religious basically movement.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I also I would add to that. I think the notion that well, it was Britain who made Israel, which is true, and therefore it's wrong for the Muslims to be mad at Israel. They should only be mad at Britain. I think that's a bit silly. I mean, like, who has the power dynamic now? It's the Israeli government who was refusing to engage in they have the power dynamic. If Israel wanted, they could say, okay, we're going to end the open air concentration camps. We're going to instill we're going to instill a fig leaf, and we're going to have a two-state solution. Would you like to jump to the table with us? Maybe we can go back to the 1948 borders. Would you be okay with that? And if the Palestinians still said no, get all out, all the Jews get out now, then I think you'd probably be more correct in saying, yeah, Palestine's more wrong.
That's literally happened 7 times.
No, but like right now, like I think
No. Stop. They've literally done that 7 times in the history of Israel and Palestine. I don't remember. I don't have to check the dates. But on multiple occasions in talks with not only Palestine, but the other Muslim governments around, where they have made concessions, it always backfires and there's always more aggression, because the position of both Hamas, most of the Muslim countries around there, and the Palestinians is that they want all Israel's out. This has been recorded by their leaders through decades, and these talks have failed every single time. This is a thing they have literally done multiple times, and it fails every time, which goes to what Milith was saying. I think the rise of the far right in that country is because of how many concessions they've made and how often they have failed and backfired. What should have happened was the Muslim community should have embraced the Jews when they moved there, not attacked them, been pissed at the British people, 100% agree with you on that, never attacked the Jews, been okay with the Jews for the most part, worked together with the Jews, and the whole country would have been better. Like, the Jewish people brought only prosperity to the entire country, aggregating it, giving technology. Like, if the Muslims would just work with the Jews and not hate them, the Jews would have been open to anything. Full trade, full open borders, not an issue. No one would have cared. The problem was the rockets. The Muslims 100% caused all of these problems. It's 100% the Muslims. They would just stand down, work with the Jews. The Jews would give open borders. Everybody's happy. The Jews are not the problem here. The Jews are not the ones keeping the bars closed. It's the Muslims who attack and try to kill them all.
Yeah, so I just think a better analogy would be like, if I came into your basement and I was like, okay, this is mine now. It's like, we just have to get along. It's like, well, you don't have the right to be there. Like, you don't. And then like you fight me, and then I win,
so-
and now I take like your garage too. It's like,
things.
well, you should
It's
just
not,
you should
it's not yours.
make
It was never yours. The Persians
it was the Palestinians.
Persians conquered it from the Jews. It's the Jews' land. You stole it from them. The British stole it back and gave it back to them. So it's wrong to try and say, well, it was my home and the British took it, even though I stole it from those other guys. Like, no, that's not how it works. Yes, history is bloody and people steal houses all the time. Shouldn't make a difference. There's enough room for both of you there. It's not yours. You don't have any ownership to it. Based off of international law, it was conquered by war. It's the British. They can do whatever they want with it. It's their house now. And so there's no legitimate complaint there that it's your house. None whatsoever.
Okay. Well, I think that a lot of the hatred against Israel is Israel's fault, and I do think they need to end the open air concentration camps. And I think that won't end the rocket attacks, but I think you would have like a more moral justification if you just like stopped the oppression. I think Israel is to blame for October 7th. I think Netanyahu wanted it.
That makes no sense. That makes literally no sense. So like,
we're just gonna have to respectfully disagree.
How long have the open air concentration camps been around?
I have to Google that.
What is
It's not forever.
open air?
They haven't been around there forever. Did the Muslim community, were they attacking and trying to kill and push out the Jews prior to those camps?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So all of these.
So we
things,
should. I think that we.
Well,
I
just
think
clarify.
that we need to.
That the reason Israel.
It's not just the open air concentration camps, but keep going.
The reason Israel has put in all of these evil policies is in response to the harm done by Muslims to them, not just because they hate Muslims. If there was no damage done to them, if you just stopped and worked with them, they'd get rid of all these policies. These policies are only in place to protect the Israeli people. That's it.
It's not working. It's not protecting them. It's actually making them worse. Like the fact that you're like preventing the Palestinians from like even collecting rainwater and all these things, you can justifiably say, okay, we're just doing this to keep ourselves safe. And maybe you're right, but you're making them hate you, and you're gonna make things worse.
That's how all conflict works.
I feel like you have a circle of blood here, and you're just like continuing the circle of blood. I think you need to cut the thread.
The people who need to cut the thread are the Muslims. The Muslims need to cut the thread. They're the ones who have always been causing problems.
That's okay. Israel has the power dynamic here. They can make concessions.
The power dynamic just doesn't
It's
matter.
the only thing that matters, the power dynamic. If you
stop, that's so stupid. How can you be so stupid? Like, again, Israel always had the power. They always did. In all of the wars, they always had the power.
They could concede more.
It doesn't make a difference. The ones who need to stop are the ones who are the aggressors, regardless of
the aggressors are Israel.
No, the aggressors are the Muslim community who literally tried to wipe Israel off.
We're just gonna disagree on this one.
How do you like? This isn't something you get to disagree on. This is just a fact. Like, what part of the Muslim community tried to kill all Israelis multiple times and never stopped do you get to disagree with? Anybody else? Questions, comments, philosophy, politics? Oh, Sevi. I cannot hear him. Can anybody else hear Sebi?
I was letting.
Right.
Sorry.
You have a question, comment? Anybody? Questions, comments, philosophy, politics, whatever.
I can hear you.
Hey T-Jump, can you hear the IX guy?
I cannot. Is Ix saying stuff?
Oh yeah, sorry, he was saying stuff.
Let me refresh all my end.
Like that?
I can. Now I can hear you.
Okay, hi.
Hey.
Sorry, I thought you were just like annoyed at me, which was a little strange, but that makes more sense. Audio glitch. Okay. I tried to say a couple things during the conversation. Now I understand why nobody paused
Oh, my
to
bad.
hear me
Yep,
out.
yep.
Oh, no, it's okay. All I wanted to say was, I think like it's understandable that like the further you go back, the more complicated the matter of who started what gets. But even if you were like an alien and you didn't know really how humans worked or all about our cultures and so on, and you just came from outer space and you said, oh, this is a conflict, what would the solution to this look like? The solution to it is going to require both sides probably to make significant steps to get their political internal affairs in order to be able to reach some kind of mutually acceptable solution, whether that be a one-state or a two-state solution or whatever. And there previously was such process that took place multiple times and didn't really reach an agreeable set of compromises. But at least it was happening. As Tijan mentioned, there were 6 or 7 attempts to draw up maps and to propose things, but almost all of those were really bad in the sense that they had a Swiss cheese where Palestinians weren't the cheese. The Palestinians were the holes in the cheese. You wouldn't be able to walk from one part of Palestine to the other in those previous maps. And then the opposite was, let's go back to 1948 and so on, which also probably is unrealistic. But at that point, what the Israeli governments were doing that was helpful is they were actually freezing settlements in the West Bank. They were dismantling some of them by force, which wasn't popular internally, with the people being told to get out of their illegal settlements. And they were doing those steps to at least to create the appearance that they were serious about the process. And like we could just set aside all the like who started it stuff, even though it's all true and it's not that it's irrelevant, but it's not going to get us to a solution. There has to be either a map for 2 states that actually has continuity between the people's borders where they can walk from place to place, or there has to be some kind of one-state solution. As far as I can tell, those are the only 2 viable solutions.
I don't think
and
so.
Probably.
So I would say that, I mean, I agree that who started it doesn't really matter, but I think the reason.
I didn't say it didn't matter. I just said it won't get a solution.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not trying to dismiss the blame. Like there's a lot of fucked up shit that happened. It's really bad on both sides. I'm not saying one side is better or worse than the other, that it's not meaningful. Just it's not
Right.
going to solve the problem.
The reason I bring it up is because I think the reason it's important is, let's say you have 2 guys fighting. One guy 100% stands down and says, okay, let's stop. And the other guy keeps punching. And then we reverse the situation. Let's say the guy B stops the fight and guy A is like, all right, yeah, we can stop too. Who's to blame for the fight? Because if guy A stops, the fight isn't going to stop. They're going to keep going. The guy B is going to keep punching. Who needs to stop? Who do we need to force them to stop? It's guy B. Guy B is the problem. Guy A is not the problem. Guy A is ready to stop at any time. He's like, yeah, we don't need to do this. Guy B is the one causing the problem. And in this situation, who's guy B? If Israel stands down, 100% demilitarization, just open borders, we just stop. What happens? More Jews die. Muslims are not going to stop persecuting Jews. Not going to happen. We're not there yet. Islam community needs to still grow up, modernize, become more moderate significantly before it happens. Not going to happen. So if Israel stands down, we still got a bunch of dead Jews. Not going to stop. If Palestine, if the Muslims, if Hamas stand down, it's over. Israel just stops. They just open borders. We don't care. Let them in. Not an issue. It's over.
These are both kind of unrealistic scenarios. I get what you're trying to say, which is that there's some principle about which side is more committed to violence against the other.
Yes.
There's something to that. I get that, right? It's just that neither of those scenarios, as thought experiments, are actually possible. But what was closer was in the 90s when Clinton was basically forcing or mediating.
Well, so just
and
there's
they
a
were
reason I
drawing
say that.
maps.
So the 100% stand down. If Israel 100% stands down, and the Muslim community are going to continue to try to kill them, no compromise is going to matter. It doesn't matter how much they compromise. Compromise 99%, 98%, 97%, 50%. If they can compromise to 100% and still be attacked, there's no point to have the conversations. And the Israelis know that. That's why their government is like, they're very hesitant to make any kind of significant changes that pose any risk, because they know it's not going to make a difference. That's what history has taught them. So the problem isn't the Jews. It's just not. Like, do they do some bad things? Yeah, 100%. Agreed. But what the problem is, the community of Islam and their hatred of the Jews. That's the problem we need to solve. And once that problem gets solved, then we can start talking about negotiations of a two-state solution.
The thing is, though, you could just like leave all those problems aside and you could still have a solution one way or the other, or no solution reached, even if that so-called problem is solved. A solution is going to have to involve a negotiation. Negotiations were happening before. Negotiations have broken down. So negotiations have to restart eventually. And until then, nothing's going to change. And it's not going to happen just because their culture, it's not going to be impossible or happen either way just because their culture changes.
Well, so I'm making, go ahead, Amy. Well, I wanted to just, so my point here is that, let's say negotiations happen, they come to an agreement, they settle the agreement, it will make no difference. We're going to go back to exactly where we are because the Muslims aren't going to stop. They're not going to stop hating the Jews.
I think you need to slightly nuance that. So Hamas is probably not going to stop. I agree. I think at this point it's clear that Hamas is a front for Iran, essentially. I mean, they have their own autonomous desires, but Iran is basically going to just keep goading them in that direction and is operationally advising their attacks on Israel at this point, the same way they do.
So this is like, I think the really important question is, when is it the society's fault? When is it the ideology's fault? Not the government, not the terrorists. When is it the ideology's fault? And I think if we look at the polls of the Muslim countries and how much they hate the Jews and how much they admit hating the Jews, which is a majority, like stupid majority. Yeah, the problem is the culture. The problem is the culture of Islam in the Middle East, not the Jews, not Hamas. Hamas is an extremist result, but it's the culture. It's the religion. That's the problem. Sam Harris is right on this.
I think pragmatically, though, the reality is that these countries are led by administrations which will cut deals. Egypt has cut a deal with Israel. Saudi Arabia was in the process of cutting a deal, like literally in the weeks before this, to recognize Israel. And one of the possible motives for the attack's timing was specifically to sabotage Saudi Arabia making any kind of deal with Israel. So it's not the case that the people in the country's opinion has to all be aligned for a deal to be reached with the government. And what they had before, the PLO government, was making significant inroads towards actually getting a deal reached, regardless of like hurt feelings and like desires for violence in the common people.
I don't follow your argument here. So like,
if Islam, peace not possible, when governments are what makes the difference between peace agreements signed.
Well, the governments are relevant here. So again, Hamas and most of the terrorist organizations, until Palestine elected Hamas into power, they weren't a part of the government. Of course, they're funded.
You said Palestine. That's wrong. You're talking about the Gaza.
Yeah. So,
okay, you know what the West Bank is, right? It's not
so the point is that these terrorist organizations aren't the government. They're people.
You know, the PLO runs the West Bank. You know that, right?
Okay. It's not relevant.
So the PLO is still the same PLO that was trying to reach peace agreements.
I don't care. The terrorist organizations aren't the government. The peace treaties don't matter. They're irrelevant. They don't matter. They're not going to stop the terrorists from being terrorists. The only way to stop that is to make Islam more moderate. The reason they get so many people is because Islam is crazy backwards. Like, if you just look at the polls of how much Jew hatred there is in all of the Muslim countries, it is astonishingly stupid. That's the problem. The reason there are so many terrorist organizations attacking Jews in other countries is because of that, not because of the governments, not because of the things Israel does. It's because of that. It is the internalized, systemic hatred of the Jews that is endemic to the ideology in its current form. That's the problem. Once that gets fixed, everything else goes away. That's the problem.
I think it might be the reverse though, because if you look at
How?
polls for like, let me finish. Okay, if you look at the polls for like why people say that they're so anti-Israeli, then one of the number one things cited by people like Osama bin Laden is Israel-Palestine. It's the issue that they bring up over and over and over again. So the number one thing that Israel could do to cause and effect a solution is to bring about peace agreement with an amenable government like the PLO, which would immediately deflate a
Would do
significant amount
nothing.
of
It
the
would have
anti-Semitic
zero
movement
effect. That's
in the
that's
Muslim world.
delusional. Like, the Jew
Well,
hatred,
we
but
can make these
well, no,
predictions.
this is
Okay,
something we know for a fact. The Jew hatred was before any of the camps, before anything Israel did. There was the Jew hatred. They literally tried to wipe them off the planet multiple times. This has nothing to do with the, like, obviously bad stuff Israel does is a great poster for why you hate Israel. But the question is if they stop doing that, are you going to stop hating them? If guy A throws up his hands and say, I don't want to do this anymore, is guy B going to stop? The answer is no. We know the answer is no. The answer has been no for hundreds of years, for thousands of
but
years.
these aren't guys.
They are.
That's the problem. Is it's an
It
oversimplified
is
model
not.
because it's not two guys. It's not Islam versus
It
Judaism.
is.
It's countries with complex systems. And in the case of Palestine, there are two different governments, the PLO and Hamas, respectively. Hamas is the one which is committed to jihad, and the PLO has been trying to get a solution.
Right. So again, this goes back to the question: when is it the culture that is the problem? There has to be an answer that is yes, the culture is the problem here.
If it were just the culture that was the
I don't care.
problem,
No.
then there
Forget
wouldn't
the
be the
just.
PLO.
Forget the just. When is the culture the problem? When is it that we say your culture needs to change before we get to a solution? When can we say the culture is the problem? This is the answer that I think
That would be the case. It would be solely the culture is the problem.
solely.
If it were the case that there weren't countries and governments within that culture successfully reaching peace agreements with Israel, which we see even in countries where the majority of the people hate Israel, the government still reaches a peace
I don't
agreement.
care about the peace agreements. I care about
Retain
do a peace agreement stop terrorists?
Yes,
No.
in many cases.
No. The answer is no. They don't.
It actually does, right? Because the countries sponsor terrorism. So
That's true. That's true.
If Israel successfully reached an agreement with a government like Jordan, right, then the Jordanians backing terrorism of the PLO goes down or ends, right? That's the value of, because it's a proxy war. So these terrorists don't get the weapons from nowhere. They need help, right? So Syria, Jordan, uh, Iran, they all fund these terrorist groups and give them weapons and help.
Sure.
So the agreement with the government sponsoring them does reduce the terrorism.
Sure, I agree. It reduced the terrorism. Is it going to stop? Are the governments going to stop giving them weapons? No. Why? Because they hate the Jews. That's it. That's the answer. Like, if we could come to an agreement, if it was literally just the Muslim countries are dissatisfied with the treatment of Palestinians, and if the Israelis could stop the treatment and it would end, it would have been over a long time ago. That's not the reason they're giving the weapons. That's not the reason. They don't. It's a religious war. It's they want their Holy Land back. They don't like the Jews on the Holy Land. They want the Jews off the Holy Land. That's the reason. That was the reason they started giving all of the weapons, because they lost the wars. Well, now what can we do? Because we can't fight them because we're going to lose. Well, we'll give weapons to terrorists. That's how we fight them. The whole justification for why the Muslim world is sponsoring all this terrorists is because they hate the Jews. That's the answer.
But it's not the entire Muslim world doing it. It's not monolithic, and the governments that Israel has peace agreements with don't do this.
They still do it,
That's
actually.
the point. It's complicated.
They still do it, actually. They just do it under the table.
Well,
they just do it.
And
okay, if you could show me evidence that say like the government of Egypt is doing this, or if you could show me evidence that the governments that they've reached agreements with are still doing it, I'd like to see that. I think it's more complicated. I'm not saying you're wrong, that that's not like a significant factor. I agree that's a big contributing factor. It's just that the actual
Hamas
solution
tunnels to Egypt
can be
played key
reached
role in arming
regardless.
Hamas.
What's that?
Hamas tunnels to Egypt played a key role in arming Hamas.
Okay, so you're saying that the Egyptian government gave them all the weapons,
No.
or that they did the smuggling themselves?
Partially. So both. Not all of it. They did less, but yes. The governments can give funding and weapons to areas that they know can then be translated into other, just like America does. America doesn't give weapons to its enemies, but it does give them through arms dealers and indirectly to fund people under the table. Does it do that? Yes. Do they have treaties against that? Yes. That say they won't do it? Yes. Does it happen anyway? Yes. That's how governments work.
Okay, well, I see allegations that Egypt is doing this coming from Israel. I'm not seeing the evidence yet. But I mean, it's possible. Anyway, all I'm saying is it's complicated. And if you reach agreements with governments, you're going to be able to get things to change, even if it takes a very long time for people's opinions to change. And that's why the PLO is such an important partner. Without the PLO, there's no way to get peace with Palestinians. Hamas has to go. Like, I kind of agree with just rooting Hamas out of Gaza, because Hamas has ruined Gaza. But if the PLO replaced Hamas, like, Gaza could recover.
I don't think that's true. I think it's just going to replace by more Hamas. Like, it's just kind of like what happened
Anyway,
in
we could probably move on at this point.
Iraq or Iran. Like, yeah, we can put in a democratized government that's just going to be replaced by another terrorist organization.
But this war, brought to you by religion.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Pillsbury Farm.
So, Sebi, you wanted to go. Sorry, thanks for being so patient.
Yeah, no worries. So I got a very quick question. So when going about representing the church of the best possible world, I obviously lay out the 3 bits of apparatus: intuition, progress, and abstraction. So like hypotheticals, reductios. When people question you on progress and they question you for like the historicity, is that like independent research that I have to do, or do you have like any literature on hand that I could like personally cite?
What part of historicity and intuition?
I just guess if like the other interlocutors question you on whether or not it is the case that your theory does track phenomena across epochal ages, like when people question you in debates, what do you tend to cite?
What question?
So I don't know which like specific question. Just if they're like probing you on progress, do you just push them on? What do you mean by like specifically?
Like moral progress. So I think you're talking about like, so in
Yeah.
philosophy, moral progress is well studied. There's a very broad field on it. You can just Google moral progress. There's lots of stuff on it. So that's one of those super common things that doesn't actually need a resource, because you just Google the very basics of it.
If you want a book,
um,
Michael Shermer wrote The Arc of History. That's a book just about moral progress.
or Steven Pinker's The Better
Oh, shit,
Angels
thanks.
of Our Nature. That's a good one. There's a whole bunch of studies that are going on the moral progress of humanity, 100 years of long peace, the abolitions of slavery, women's rights, workers' rights. It's a very well researched thing. It's not like I have to find a specific paper.
Oh yeah, that's fair. And so one quick question after. Again, this question might be too vague and broad, so tell me if you can't answer. But so last week on the Theist Helpline, some guy came up and
Last week I was
a bit of debate, bro. Oh, sorry, 2 weeks ago then. Yeah, so a guy came up and tried to question you on your ethical system and was talking about like modal scopes, and you like immediately said to them, no, this is like debate bro semantic stuff. I don't engage.
Yep.
Do you have like advice for other debaters how to identify that kind of debate bro semantic stuff? Because you seem to have like a good job of like disarming them quickly. I get like caught up in it too much, I feel.
It'd be best to try to ask them, how does this relate to a commonly understood topic related to my model? And if they can't, then it's just debate bro stuff. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you into a dialogue tree related to hyper specialized philosophical semantics. So if they can't take that and break it down into something simple, relatable to how your model or whatever you're debating relates to whatever topic you're talking about, then it's just debate bro semantics. Because what they want to do is they want to find some kind of a semantic twist or semantic contradiction in whatever specialized field they're talking at, which is relevant to the core of whatever system you're talking about. So they have to be able to relate whatever semantics they're bringing in to some kind of particular example of your model. And if they can't do that, it's debate bro stuff. Because like if they're
Okay,
being
thanks.
genuine, they're going to be like, so here's a question, here's a problem with your model, here's a question I have, and maybe they're just bad at explaining it and they can only explain it with complicated philosophy, but they'll be able to tie it back into that very specific example of your model. And if they're just saying, well, what about modal scope? It's just debate bro garbage.
Fine, yeah. And I'm sure, like, with experience, I'll be able to identify it.
Wait,
yeah,
I have a
think-
question about that. Like, what do you mean it's debate bro garbage? So, are you using the word best possible world?
What was that a question? What was the question?
Yeah. The question is like in your definition of morality, the word possibility appears, right?
Yes.
So you do have to specify a modality.
Yeah, like, so that would be an example of a specific question. You're saying in your term best possible worlds, is possible used in the kind of modality sense? The answer is no. It's more in the generic sense. So that would be irrelevant. But like the debate bros would be not giving a specific example. They're saying specifically trying to get you tied down into deep philosophical discussions that are just irrelevant. So like if you would just stop there and be like, yeah, okay, so you didn't mean specifically about modality in that possible sense. It's just a generic label. Fine. Okay, move on. But if you're hyper focused on the semantics, then it's just a waste of time.
Like, maybe I am hyper focused on the semantics. Like, I don't know what you mean by generic possibility. Like,
No. Generic.
Let me just
Nomological is
the way
usually what people mean by it.
the way people mostly use the term common English, not generic as in most
Like-
common English speakers, not
Like nomological possibility, just like possible within the actual physical world.
Yeah, I would just call that like physical possibility or nomological possibility. But if you're saying possible in your definition of best possible world just means possible within the physical world, then I'm very
yeah,
confused.
no, I would probably say something different. But the best possible world is meant to, it's a title. It's like a name of a book, Game of Thrones. By thrones, what kind of thrones do you mean? Like it's a title. Shut up. Stop wasting my time. The point is to convey this is the highest moral standard that could be. That's it. To someone who reads the title. That's it. There's no deeper philosophical meaning. Just the title, which is meant to convey to any human who reads the title, this is the highest moral standard. That's it. Each word doesn't have any significant philosophical meaning behind it.
So like, why use possible at all? Why don't you just say like, what I mean
Because
is,
people mostly claim it's impossible, and they're wrong.
well, sorry, how did you word it before? What you said, like best of all possible worlds, just means
It's meant to convey to people who read it that this is the best moral, highest moral standard.
highest moral standard, right? Okay. So yeah, like I would just use highest moral standard, like because like I don't know, like my conception of possibility is such that like it needs to be tied to a modality, right? Like so like something can be physically possible and logically possible, physically impossible. It can be like technologically impossible but physically possible. It can be like epistemically impossible.
But that's why I said this is the
ontologically
the way most average readers understand the word, not philosopher bros. So think of it, how would an everyday average English reader read this? Not how would a philosopher read this?
An everyday average reader would think possibility is something like
The
logical
best
possibility or
way,
physical possibility?
no, they wouldn't think of it. They'd say this is the best way the world could be. That's what they would say in their heads. The best possible world means the best way the world could ever be ever. That's it.
Yeah, that just seems like a rephrasing. Like
That's what it means to
the
most
best way the
people.
world
The,
could
the
be
modality part is irrelevant
yeah.
to anyone who isn't a
Yeah, I
philosopher.
get
It
it.
just doesn't have any meaning to them. The whole point of that sentence is just say this is the best way the world could be. That's it. That's all it means. There's no modality garbage, it's just common everyday, what would a normal human understand this word to mean? The best way the world could be.
Yeah, but that is a modal claim.
Yes, but it's irrelevant. The point
Right,
is just
okay.
to communicate the common everyday meaning.
And when you say the best way the world could be, what do you mean by it specifically? Like, if I were to ask you, like,
Morally perfect.
no, I just mean like, do you mean like it's the best way the world could be logically? Do you mean it's the best way the world could be metaphysically? Do you mean it's the best way the world could be physically?
Morally.
Do you mean it's the best way the world could be given our epistemic
Morally. It's the
limitations?
best way
Like,
the world could
what do
be
you mean by
morally.
it? Okay, so like, can you give me a sense of what it like what a moral modality is?
Nope. It's not. I probably could. I could probably spend the time thinking about that to figure it out. It just has zero value.
Well, I don't know. I'm just trying to get clear on like what you're saying, right? So like, if you're saying something like
zero value, there's no value that I could use this to communicate to most people anything of any significance whatsoever. Like if I was going to write a paper in an academic journal, this might be an interesting topic to explore. But since my target audience is the vast majority of humans, this is a complete waste of time to speak about. I don't care. If you want to figure it out, go for it. You can try to figure it out on your own. I have no interest in it. As long as most people understand what I mean by the phrase, I'm good. I can skip all that stuff.
So,
hello.
Just a basic question. So, like, do you think if most people understand what you mean by something, do you think that means that you're speaking consistently?
Not necessarily.
Right. Okay, that's fine.
Hello, Comp Miki.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about like there was this like a thing by Science Alert. Basically, it was there was like a study on like scientists trying to figure out the chemical reaction of how humans what is it called? They're trying to figure that out, right?
How humans
we don't know what you finish the sentence. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like
figure what out.
How like babies have been born and stuff, like the chemical reactions of that.
You got to be specific. We don't know what you mean.
It's a true statement.
Men have been puzzled by this for millions of years.
Like, how is Batty formed?
Because I wanted to ask, because especially T jump and IX, like I heard you guys say it's like mostly random, so
I have no idea what you're
Are
talking
you
about.
asking where does life come from?
Oh no, they know how it's done.
How did abiogenesis take place? Or you're asking about evolution? Like,
oh no, I'm not asking. I'm not talking about the obvious, like sperm and then like someone gets a baby, but I'm talking about like what kind of chemicals would make such a thing.
Make what such
the
thing?
DNA. DNA is
a baby.
Like amino acids to make life possible? Or
yeah,
how does an embryo form?
Yeah, basically, basically trying to make dinosaurs again.
If you just refrain from using the word basically, because every time you say basically, it's like you just stopped explaining and we don't know what you mean. Just there's no rush. You can take all the time you need to explain it, but just don't end the sentence with basically, because we're not going to know what you mean.
Yeah, so how to make dinosaurs again with this chemical reaction.
Have you seen Jurassic Park?
Yeah.
Okay. So the premise, it was in a book, but to some extent, experiments kind of like this occur, where they take DNA of one animal and they splice it with the DNA of the other animal. And so the hypothesis that Jurassic Park explored is that if you took the DNA of an animal that's degraded in some form, like because of millions of years of damage preserved in some amber or something, that you could like just fill in the blanks with a related species, like another mammal or amphibian, and that it would be able to survive. The problem isn't just that that's not possible, because it may be that it's possible and we do it with, like, I don't know, woolly mammoths or something. The problem is that dinosaurs' DNA is not preserved. The premise of Jurassic Park is false. If we actually look at the so-called what's left of insects with dinosaur blood in their gullets or whatever, there's no DNA remotely recoverable actually left.
Birds have those type of DNA, right?
Birds have bird DNA. They have a common ancestor with dinosaurs, but the Jurassic Park scenario is not actually plausible, but it makes for a really cool what if scenario anyway.
So yeah, what we would need is we would need
Yeah, but
a consistent preserved amount of DNA that we could then take and put into an artificial cell and then let the DNA multiply and grow and divide into multiple cells to then grow a dinosaur. That's how we would do it. Does that answer your question?
but you would need like an inhabitants type of thing, like an egg or just like someone that can hold it.
We can make
So it can-
artificial cells. It's already been done. Craig Venter did that. We can make an artificial cell to hold.
Wait, you can make. But I thought that was not possible. You know.
That's possible. We can make artificial cells. We can just take a current cell, remove the DNA from it, put in different DNA. Problem solved.
Yeah. The problem is
Yeah,
there's no good copy of dinosaur DNA like Jurassic Park was claiming. Jurassic Park just made up the idea of what if it was possible, and there isn't any actual dinosaur DNA available.
Yeah, I thought that was not possible to just take a different cell. Like I just because if you put two different cells together, then they would not like work together,
Yeah.
right?
You're not taking cells together. You're replacing the DNA payload in the cell with a different DNA payload. The cell is the machine around the DNA.
It's a cover.
Okay, I get it,
Also,
man.
You
Did
would
you have any other
think
questions?
that he liked dinosaurs, but he also made Westworld, which is also a park, so maybe he just liked parks.
Yeah,
He's a
so I mean the
science
other
park
question
enthusiast.
was like I don't know if you know the white hole, right?
Dirty thoughts. Dirty thoughts.
As in, like, it's a repulsive energy instead?
Yeah, like basically it's like the opposite of a black hole from what I've heard.
I guess my only question is, what about them?
Do you know anything about it?
They can't exist because they violate the law. Second law
they
of thermodynamics.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're
They're
hypothetical,
generally-
but not compatible with our current model of physics.
Exactly.
But I heard it.
Hypothetical.
I heard from some scientists it's like a theory though, like it might actually
No,
exist.
Not
you know?
not quite. So when we say we have a theory in science, we actually mean something much stronger than what you think of colloquially as a theory, right? So
Yeah.
there's a conjecture, that's what we would actually call it in scientific terms. A conjecture is something that's far, far before the stage of it reaching status of a theory in physics terms. It's like we have a theory of gravity. Do you think gravity is fairly well proven? That's a theory. Because the theory perfectly explains all the things we observe gravity doing and explains, for the most part, why it does those things until you get to a very, very, very small scale with quantum mechanics where it doesn't quite work. But it's, up until that point, a complete explanation of all the past data and a complete prediction of all future data. That's the theory.
Yeah, but like that, then it's just an estimate. It's just an estimate of what it is, right? Or
It's what we call, so a successful model that reaches the status of being the paradigmatic model is what we mean when we talk about like the scientific theory of X. I mean, it's the model which is currently believed to be the closest to correct model.
okay, then I'll use something that like would basically not like include white hole. Then like maybe like is it true that like stars like stars make people? Does that make sense?
They create elements by way of fusion. So if you know each element has a different number of protons in its nucleus, right? So all the numbers on the atomic table and the arrangement of the atomic table of elements is because of a proton number in their nucleus. So for every number of protons that could be in a nucleus, there is an element. And when we only knew about some of the elements, we knew that there were elements in between those elements because we knew element A had 27 protons in its nucleus, element B had 29. So we didn't know what had 28, but we left a blank in the table until we found it because we knew that for every number of protons, there's going to be an element. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but my question is evaporated, like, is it evaporated light matter, if that makes sense?
I'm not familiar with the term evaporated light. I'm sorry, I probably don't know what that is. But the point is that what stars are doing with fusion is causing different amounts of protons to fuse into nuclei, which is what produces what we call the elements.
Also, we're here directly because of stars. Stars dying because they went supernova, and in that supernova, they created all of the heavier elements. They were able to make carbon, and then these new stars that coalesced from those dead stars, some of them were able to have liquid water. They were able to have the energy of this new sun, and then now life is able to exist.
But wait, so that means every single star that I might see could just be another planet or another, like, something like that, right?
Well, you say another planet, but that's like a weird way. I mean, everybody in the sky, you'd have to check for what it is. It could just be, asteroids. It could be lots of different things. But generally speaking, we are looking for something that has a sun. A sun is a big ball of hydrogen. That's probably not going to change no matter what.
Makey, do you want a place to start if you want to learn more about like space and physics?
I mean, me personally, I've been trying to look into chemistry a little bit, but
Okay.
It's a really,
Have you
I heard it's like a really hard thing to do, to look into it.
It's high school level as far as like stoichiometry and just like doing the calculations for, if you have a petri dish, you take chemical A to chemical B, you know their composition, you can write them out in an equation similar to you do with math, and you can calculate what the rate of change and the resulting products will be. You can do a high school level course. I think Khan Academy probably has the high school chemistry course. You can just go to Khan Academy, look up chemistry, and you can figure out what all the prerequisites are and start at the very bottom of the list of prerequisites and work your way through it. And that would be enough
Yeah.
chemistry knowledge to do some real experiments. Like, don't go Breaking Bad or anything, but you could make some cool science experiments and, amaze your friends with some neat demonstrations of some science. If you go through all that stuff. But if you want to learn the big picture of science and start kind of learning about it all from a space up perspective, I would start with Cosmos. Have you watched Cosmos with Carl Sagan or Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Nah, not really.
That's kind of the best starting point that I recommend most people begin with, because it gives a very comprehensive picture, and you should watch both series. Watch the original Carl Sagan series. It's all free online. Just Google "watch Carl Sagan's Cosmos free." You will find it.
Is it like so is it on Netflix or?
It's on there's free versions of it. It's like it's old enough now that you can watch it on the Internet Archive. You don't need a streaming subscription. Dailymotion has it. Internet Archive has it. It's called Cosmos with Carl Sagan. And then when you finish that, watch the Neil deGrasse Tyson version, which has different content. They're not redundant with each other. There's a bunch of new data and new stories that are more up to.
It is on Apple TV and Amazon Prime Video as well.
Yeah. So I recommend
Oh,
watching
that's good to know.
Watch both versions of Cosmos. And then if you do want to dive into chemistry, for instance, or any other of the sciences, two websites that are really good to learn the stuff. One is, this is going to sound like a YouTube subscription, but I'm not paid by them, I swear. First, watch Khan Academy, which is a nonprofit. And second, you could go to some other science learning websites like Brilliant, which have interactive stuff that's also really good.
Okay. I get. Could you send me Can you send me them? Maybe the names at least.
Yeah. So we have an atheist caller show text chat, and I'll post a couple links in there for everybody, and then I'll DM them to you if you have trouble getting that channel to show up.
Yeah. Yeah, but what was he German the other guy talking about? I think it was something about morality or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
something like that.
he jumps morality very specifically seems to trigger lots of people, and so.
Is the best of all possible worlds or something like that.
It is very specifically imposition of will, and that I understand what he's saying very much, even if a lot of atheists have different versions. I don't think it's. I don't know, the anger that he gets from not wanting to impose his will on others.
Best if possible. Imposing will on someone else. Like, what do you mean by that, though? What does Tijo mean by that?
He's
He
not
just got up
being-
from his chair.
Yeah, so I would say, and this is once again, this is just my interpretation, but you are not throwing someone outside of a window. You are not doing something that they do not want. You are imposing your will onto them.
I don't get why people are really mad about that, though.
Really?
I don't get it.
Like I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not objective or subjective, or actually I think they're somewhat both. But I mean, even from a lay understanding of this concept, I understand that, like, if someone were to put their hands on you, you'd be like, this is life. Life happens. Here's this guy. He's putting. Well, I guess if he's a cute guy, maybe I'd want that. But then it would be, not really an imposition of my will. I mean,
Yeah, so it depends. Like, I feel like it depends on like the situation, right? But
sure, but even if it
Yeah.
depended on the situation, it would still be for or against your will, wouldn't it?
like if it was like let me see. So you said something. You told me a situation where someone would like touch.
Yeah, like someone just decides that you're waiting at a train station, and just someone comes up to you and they just decide to put their hands on your chest.
Yeah.
And they're just staring at you, just like, "Hi, how are you?" It's a complete stranger. Would you be
Yeah.
okay with that?
No.
Why?
No. Because I don't know the person.
You would almost say they're like imposing their hands, maybe almost like something that I feel
I
like
mean,
the last thing would be
the
Smith.
situation where Tjum's thing might not work is if their will is to touch you and your will is to not be touched, then it kind of goes in circles like that. Because now you have a crash in a system where no one can impose someone's will, but the way for things to work is everyone's will has to be carried out, and if it's their will to do this, they're not going to just turn back on their will. So then it doesn't work in that way.
See, but now you're using two factors. You're saying it has to be my will and your will, and we both have to comply to something. But it's really about the other person's will. Like I could be like, I really want to have this person consent to me putting their hands on them, but that doesn't really make it their will. It's glad that there's one person, but it's kind of like they are the concerning factor because it's an imposition of their will.
But yeah, okay,
Can I
but
try offering something?
Sure.
Are you familiar with the concept of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Do you understand where that concept came from in the philosophical tradition?
You mean me?
Yes, you.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you truly do understand that, then this question doesn't really make any sense, because
No,
that argument explains why you have to start, like, the living get to debate, the dead don't engage in the debate, right? And so by definition, the living have some, what Heidegger called Dasein, some value of just being alive. And then if you want to try to measure the value of life, you have to acknowledge there is no scale, there is no metric that can be used. You can't deny that it exists, but it seems to have some sort of infinite value, some unmeasurable value. And the only thing that you could possibly use as a metric is how much can you spend that life doing whatever you wish. And that is then where the idea of liberty comes in. It's like the currency of life. How much value your life has is dictated by how much liberty you have to spend that life as you wish. And so we're again forced to acknowledge that we don't have a metric, we don't have a scale to even measure that. So you have to start logically with the maximal amount of liberty and then reduce from that point backwards if you find conflicts, because liberties can't be in conflict. Or you have to, since we all lack a scale to value different levels of liberty. There's no such thing as levels of liberty. You either have it or you don't. So you have to be talking about a position of equality. We all have to have the same level of liberty, or else we haven't all agreed that all our lives have the same value.
I know what you mean. Like when you observe nature, right? Nature has a balance, it has a rhythm, and if that
balance.
imbalance is being broken, then if that balance has been broken, then there might be, some other stuff that might happen.
If you're going to keep going with your analogy, life is defined by homeostasis, by finding balance within its environment. And that is like step one of something being alive. It has found a niche in which it survives. Going beyond the boundaries and you can have multiple boundaries just around you in all directions, but it still changes nothing. The fact that you are starting from a concrete point that is a point of balance. It's not a point of extreme on any kind of scale.
Yeah, so I just want to ask you this, Walker. Like, what would you say to someone that has the will to do something to someone else, and that someone else doesn't want that, and then it's imposing their will. But if that person that is imposing their will would go away from their will, then they're imposing their own will, and then there's kind of like a
they're simply uneducated on the topic and need to be taken aside and actually given some explanation that if they wish to conduct themselves in such a way is that they think they have a value system for rating or measuring liberty or rating or measuring life, give them the opportunity to explain that, or have them acknowledge they are in exactly the same boat that everyone else is, in which we have to regard each other as equals in life and liberty and longing, because there is no philosophical scale to use in that regard. So you would just have to encourage these poor, unfortunate, uneducated ones to how to think clearly.
But what if these people get angry, that they can't impose on someone
Prisons
else's
are
will?
for. The entire point of us having a prison system is at its best to keep people who cannot learn to be civilized away from those that can.
There's actually a theory of how human beings develop their moral sensibilities as they grow up that kind of frames the complexity of these things, right? So as kids get older, they start to see and think about other people's well-being or what other people do to them differently, and it tends to go through stages. So a guy who studied child psychology, Kohlberg, came up with 5 stages and showed through data that children tended to go through these stages, where the first stage is just they do what they're told by fixed and absolute rules or not, but they don't really understand why. Stage 2, they start to understand that there are reasons for the rules in terms of how they meet people's individual needs. Stage 3, they conform to being nice, like they start doing nice things to other people to be praised or to be liked. Stage 4, they respect authority because it has some legitimacy to enforce the rules, and they want the rules so that they get protected from other people. And stage 5, they understand that there are multiple individual rights that are competing sometimes, and it's not as simple as there's an absolute right or wrong in every situation, but that there are complex decisions. These
I know
stages,
IX.
people go through those when they learn. So if someone just says, I have the right to do X, blah blah blah, and tries to bulldoze other people, like you said, it's kind of like taking somebody aside like you would a child and being patient with them that they may not be fully equipped in the different ways of moral reasoning.
But like I know this, but like some people, like me personally, I know people that like follow the rules like with the heart and stuff, and then because someone else like did bad to them, or like because other people were not breaking the rules, they felt motivated to break the rules too. Like I know what you mean.
So two wrongs made a right. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah. A lot of people are retributive. They feel like if it's in quote unquote self-defense, like the moment someone upsets them, they feel they're justified in doing something to retaliate for the person who they feel like started it against them.
But isn't that like ego though? Like I don't know. Is that ego though?
The most beneficial society I can live in is one that maximizes my effort for reward. So any energy that I expend gets the maximal amount of reward for the longest that it can in something like a democracy, where each of us is adding together our efforts to accomplish more than any individual can achieve at any given time. So for me, being the most selfish person I can be demands that I have a strong society around me so that I get the most that is possible. And so selfishness becomes self-defeating.
Okay, I get what you mean. So, because someone is selfish, that means they're gonna expend less energy, and therefore they would put less effort, and then over the long term times, they will just
Well, by definition, they would be taking from others who have actually spent that energy in the expectation that they are existing in a civilized society, one based on reciprocity. So if everyone is not doing their fair share, well, that is exactly what we say. You are not doing your fair share to the success of society. You are taking but not giving back.
I get what you mean now. So then, but like, how would that destroy like people in the future though? Like, I don't get it.
Destroy? It would be it would be the source of the future. It would make the future.
Yeah, but that means it would be like lazy or something.
No, I want maximal return for my effort. So I have to be expending effort. And if I want maximal return for the longest possible sequence, then I have to not only survive, but thrive, which is a function of civilization. You can
But
survive
like
on
me,
your own all you want, but thriving requires society.
okay, yeah, that's true. Like to progress in society, like to build things like in society, you need like more, at least two people, right, to build something, right? Mechanics, and
If you're
something.
wanting to specialize, if you're wanting to
Yeah,
have the ability of your energy expenditures and the person around you's energy expenditures yielding the most for the longest, that requires cooperation. Cooperative game theory, that's the only way to really achieve that. You can try competitive game theory. You may be able to achieve great heights, but it would be unsustainable for any length of time. You couldn't, for example, leave a legacy in that regard without somehow changing the system.
but like
Well,
Walker,
just
like it
in a
doesn't make
moment,
sense because some rich people, like they be
Have changed the rules, yes.
so in a moment, I'm just gonna add Nicola. Just have you guys have a few more questions, and then just gonna add him. Gonna keep on searching for theists to disagree with us.
Wait, you don't think I'm a theist, Amy?
Well, I would say it. Then why do you believe in a god? And can we change your mind? Because no good evidence.
Because we would all like to survive till tomorrow, and it's dangerous.
But
Wait, but we can talk about something though. Like, what do you guys think about like the morality like of the theists? Think they're good or bad?
If you are a real theist, you are holding to divine command theory. I don't see any argument against that. That's not valid.
Well, I guess you can have other moralities. It's just I don't I don't really like the Abrahamic model because I think it's the worst of both worlds.
And the Christian model, like, what do you think of the
I-
Christian model?
by
Like
real
Same thing.
theist, Walker, by real theist, you mean like a classical theist, like an
Yeah,
omni-theist?
like the
Because
if
that
you,
is,
the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the one that the majority of the world refers to if they say God.
I mean,
Now,
it's
I
debatable.
understand it's not going to cover everybody, but I'll stick with the majority.
Yeah, I mean, it's debatable whether early Judaism actually was an omni-classical theist god because it was more henotheistic, and let's just say it didn't exactly look like what they describe it as systematically in retrospect in
But
reality.
but what I noticed is that naturalistic, beliefs, like naturalistic God beliefs, came before religious beliefs. So, um, nature, nature being the God, that type of belief came before the
You've got to
religion.
be a bit careful there because religion has several definitions, and you got to make sure that you're sticking within the context of the conversation. So if you're referring to just a deeply held belief, that's one thing. But if you're talking about a structured religion around a divinity, then that's something else. And again, and as well as there's a third definition of religion, which is like something that you enjoy doing, like you play football religiously. That's like there are different definitions of the terms that are being used. If you're referring to the system of structured worship around specified gods, that's theistic. You're a named God, specified interactions, specified revelations. There's a high level of specificity that's used in academic theism. Which is why I never have a problem bringing academic theism up into the conversation because it actually makes clarity.
He's just saying that there was animism of some kind, likely before theism, based on like the
very,
artifact
very much, yeah.
that we have. Yeah,
That's the same brain damage that we've all had to inherit from our ancestors.
Yeah, because I just noticed that like more so like logical or like more so like science type of thing, like that thing came before like religious things. Like that's what I kind of noticed.
Well, they were attempting in some cases to explain just how the world worked, and theistic explanations are one type of explanation that arose and that sort of proliferated. But yeah, you could argue that just because they thought spirits ran things doesn't necessarily mean that they believed in gods, but they were trying to explain the natural world at the level that they could understand it, which was attributing agency to things, because that's how they thought about how things worked. And I think it is fair to say that there were lots of things that today we would consider kind of like spiritual sounding, but that were honest attempts to explain nature as best as people could at the time. Especially if you go to the Greek world, where you had pre-Socratics, as they're called, which is a really unfair term, because arguably they had it more right than Socrates did. But the naturalistic philosophers in Greece had different theories, like could the world have been composed first from water, since there's more water than land on the earth, it must have come first, that kind of a thing.
But like, is it really a star though? Like, I had this talk with Walker. Is it really star? Like,
star?
Chemicals come from the stars. Yes. Well, elements come from the stars. Yes.
We covered that earlier. Are we repeating the star thing?
Apparently, he doesn't believe it.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to believe. I don't know, like stars, like.
So you know what a nuclear power plant is, and you know what nuclear bombs are?
Nuclear bombs, yeah.
Okay, so fission in a nuclear bomb releases a lot of energy from inside of the atoms by splitting the bonds within the atom and unleashing the protons from the nucleus and all the energy stored in their bonds. You understand that?
Yeah,
so
but like,
the thing
what I've been wondering,
the thing that makes nuclear bombs explode and all the energy that comes out of it is the thing which, for it to be that way in the first place, required that much energy to get it that way. And the only place in space that we think that can occur is in stars, because a star is like a gigantic fusion power plant running at many, many, many times the power of our most powerful nuclear weapons all the time, every day, 24 hours a day. And what it does to the atoms, just like when we break the atoms apart and unleash your energy, is rearrange them. So saying that we understand how stars create the elements is justified, because we know quite a lot about how to manipulate the bonds, and we can understand through chemistry how these bonds actually work. It's not just conjecture to say that stars created the elements. It's well justified by our model of physics and chemistry and the experiments we can actually do to manipulate the bonds within atoms.
I know this is gonna sound stupid, but can we take a star from can we take a star and then put it in the lab and then something, you can make something happen, or
In a sense, yes, in a sense. So we're building things called fusion reactors. You understand that that's a new type of energy production that people are experimenting with. There's something called a tokamak, or there's a number of different types of fusion reactors, but the most famous one is called tokamak, right? And these are like toruses where they're doing something with energy that's different from nuclear power plants. They're doing fusion now, and they're controlling the energy within this toroid, similar to what's happening inside of the sun. And the reason it's very difficult to get these fusion plants to work properly is because the sun is very hot. So when you make something equivalent to the sun in a man-made object, it's very unstable and it tends to just explode or melt or just not do what we want. That is
or you can,
same.
there's like a special, but isn't there's like I don't know if I don't know if it's true, but there is like a special like ore, like there's a special ore that can like withstand like the heat from the sun. I'm pretty sure, right?
I don't know about that. The point is that we're using fusion
Is
to
that
make power plants in the same way that the sun generates energy. We're building small versions of that on the Earth using what's called fusion.
yeah?
But can I
So-
ask you?
yeah.
Can I ask what your model is? So how did the chemicals come to be in the universe?
What do you mean? Like how the chemicals would come to be?
Yeah, like this is the
Like
natural model through stars. How
I would agree with
your model?
IX. Like it would have to be from something like exploding. Like I don't know. I don't know if it's from stars specifically, but I would definitely say Big Bang. Like I would definitely go with Big Bang if anything
So
else.
it's actually not the Big Bang that creates the different elements, because everything, I mean, we can't say for sure, but everything about our model currently predicts that what happened in the early universe prior to the formation of the first stars was just everything was like free ions, right? And so at first, the only thing there would have been was hydrogen, which is just the simplest one proton, most basic element. And once enough of that hydrogen, the first element that could naturally form, got into one place, the gravity was strong enough to pull a lot of it together, and that triggered fusion because gravity exerts force, right? So you have all this gravity pushing into the center, and the amount of force exerted by all the gravity on just hydrogen eventually triggers fusion, and fusion rearranges the protons from the hydrogen into combinations of protons for all the other elements. That's what happened probably in the early universe. We started off with no other elements after the Big Bang, and then slowly gravity pulled the hydrogen together to make the stars, and then that triggered fusion, and that's how we got the elements.
Wait, but IX, I'm just interested in like like I heard like you said that they like kind of recreating like the things that that come out from what the stars explode. Like that come out from the stars exploding, the
So
chemicals. Is that like true?
yes. The elements are released when a star goes supernova. All of the contents of the star come out of it in the form of a spectrum of elements, right? Like
But
a good example of this is like, okay, like if you look at the rocks in the moon, and if you look at the rocks on the Earth, and if you look at the rocks on Mars, do you know what you find? They're
no.
similar. They're similar, right? And the reason they're similar is because the stuff the universe is made of is a relatively even distribution of elements at certain percentages because of like how stable they are and how many of them would have formed in the chain reactions that take place when stars go supernova. So
It's
that
only replication, right? It's only just
it,
a replication. It's not like a hundred. It's not like 100% like a copy of like what the star's elements are. Because if it was like 100% copy, then like I would like see we would like be seeing like 3 different planets near the planet Earth on Earth. That would make sense. Because
no.
stars make planets or people, right? Presumably.
So what like the thing is, this topic is very deep. It's called stellar genesis or whatever, like the formation of stars and solar systems.
Stellar
When is
nucleosynthesis.
Well, I'm talking about the whole solar system. He's talking about the planet part too, right?
Ah,
So
okay.
in addition to the nucleosynthesis, which makes the elements, there's a accretion disk that forms into the star in the first place, right? And the accretion disk is the leftovers from a neighboring star that exploded forming into a new solar system with a star that gathers them around it before it goes supernova eventually, right? And one of those accretion disks makes up all of the things that turn into the planets around the star, because they clump together into planets and moons and asteroids and this sort of thing. The thing is, we could literally just talk about this stuff for hours. That would be fun. But what you should do is you should watch Cosmos, and both seasons. Watch the original show and watch Neil deGrasse Tyson, which I sent you the links for. It'll answer all of these questions in much greater detail. And then any questions you have to follow that up with are all answered on Khan Academy.
IX, is it like Dr. Stone? Is it like Dr. Stone anime? Is it like that one?
No.
You don't know? You know Dr. Stone?
Yeah, I've watched it. It's a great show, but I kind of think you're trolling me at this point.
Oh, okay. You know, when they get petrified and they bring them back to life, is that realistic?
I have no idea. It's a fictional show.
Because IX,
science on the show that is realistic is the technology stuff. So when they do like, okay, we need to build a radio, so we have to go and get a bunch of rocks and use those rocks to extract chlorine gas, and then use the chlorine gas to like make this other thing. That stuff is realistic, sort of. They're teaching good science. They're just doing it in a ridiculous way. It's a good show. Everyone should watch Dr. Stone if you like anime. But I think we need to move on. It's been really fun chatting, Comp.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
watch
of
some
course.
Cosmos. Next time you come on, tell us what you think of however much Cosmos you've watched. How's that?
Sure. Is it unavailable on Netflix? You got Netflix?
Free. It's on Internet Archive. I sent you 2 links that are both free. Internet Archive and Dailymotion have everything.
Okay.
Yeah. It's probably on Netflix too. I think Amy said it was, but you don't even need to go to your Netflix to watch it.
So now there's
that's
no
good.
excuse. Multiple reasons.
Okay.
For avenues.
Thanks for coming up.
Yeah.
Hi, Nicolette.
Pretty sure it's
Looks-
Nyclot.
Looks like he's muted. I'm gonna
Sorry.
unmute you.
Hi, Nicolette.
You can hear me
I
now.
suck at
We
pronunciation.
can hear you now.
Yeah, my
Suffering.
shift button's messing up because I have push to talk on shift, and I think I've been pressing it so much that it's messing it up. So I think Ix knows me, and I could say I'm a theist, but a theist of a different sort. I don't believe in the Abrahamic concept of God. But I do think there are certain arguments for the existence of God, and I'm going to use that term in a very loose sense, that I think are actually very strong.
You're a polytheist.
No.
You're apparently not a theist anyone needs to worry about then.
Well, I'm just telling you, I still think the argument's interesting.
Okay,
So-
maybe I'm
But it
misremembering this as
doesn't
well.
actually take you to an extant God, right?
Well, actually, it'd be interesting if I go through it. It's from the Nazarius Meli site. These are broadly Neoplatonic concepts of God, and so the question is
Oh,
that
okay. So it's
kind
not a
of
real
God-
God then.
Well, I mean, the Ismailis do consider themselves to be a branch of Muslims. It's just they're going to understand the concept of God in a more mystical way.
I know they're playing pretend at being theist. It's kind of like deists are playing pretend at being God believers.
Well, I mean, they're all playing pretend, but
I mean, we can engage in like fantasy fiction, I suppose. Sure, go ahead. What's this argument?
Okay, so the argument, again, most people use it, the kind of argument from contingency, but I don't like that because that conflates logical modality with metaphysical modality. So I'll start out with the idea of conditioned and unconditioned realities. So the first part of the argument starts out with the idea that we experience ourselves as conditioned realities. And what that means is we depend upon something else for our existence or occurrence. So take, for example, us. We're
In
composed-
fact or in appearance?
Well, this would immediately present itself to our consciousness as the case. You would agree that you're composed of cells. The cells are composed of molecules. Molecules are composed of atoms. So you're some instance conditioned upon parts for your existence. And also at the same time,
Only if you're doing a relative perspective. If you're talking about what it appears to be from the position of within my mind, I'm going to be able to give you different answers to the questions you're asking. And then if you're asking in the totality of the coherent web around me, I'm going to give you different answers there. And I'm even going to give you different answers if we start talking about the infinite nature of reality. And
Okay,
it's
this-
kind of a Agrippa's trilemma at that point. If you're
okay,
asking
we're
a question from
rambling.
one horn, what? No, I'm explaining the point. If you're
Well,
asking a question impaled on one of the horns to someone who's not on that horn with you, it won't make any sense.
I'm not talking about, again, a regress of reasons. I'm just talking about the idea of this. So Again,
But hold on.
this is
Hold on.
I want you to give me your phenomenological account of the experience I'm talking about. So
So
again,
before you go into this dialogue, do you
hold
have
on.
a written
Okay.
version?
Okay.
I
So
want this to go well. So I would like you to, if you have a written version, like I found an argument from Thomas M. Cawthron that might be related to what you're talking about conditioned reality. Do you have?
the strongest argument from God is on the Nazarius Ismaili side.
Okay,
so
can you give us a
the
link?
first-
So there's a if you DM me to it, I will post it in the chat and
Sure.
everyone can actually see what you're talking about. Otherwise, we're gonna just spend a lot of time being like, what did you say? And can you repeat that? It's gonna be painful. So
I mean,
if
you
it's an
already
argument,
started off with a lot of jargon that we have to nail down first. So you'd
that's
have to
okay,
try to
but
avoid
we
that.
need a written. If it's a complicated argument, we need a written form of it. So just send that to me and I'll post it. Thanks. Okay, so there's a text chat for anybody who doesn't know called Atheist Call-In Show, and I'm going to post it in there. It gets
Okay,
deleted
so-
like every 10 or 15 seconds, so I'll have to repost it probably, but there we go.
Okay, so the first thing is based upon, I mean, look, we experience things in the world. We have a certain experience. So I don't see how you possibly can't understand that you're conditioned, given both supervenience and circumvenience relations. You and me as well, we have parts. We have cells. The cells are composed of molecules. The molecules are composed of atoms. The atoms are composed of subatomic particles. Immediately, this shows that we're conditioned upon these parts. And also at the same time, we exist in a greater reality for us having being as well. We depend upon kind of sunlight and oxygen and all these things. So
Hold
if
on a second.
yeah,
Okay, you said a word that I've never heard before. What is circumvenience? I know what supervenience means, but I've never heard of circumvenience.
basically we depend upon kind of the outside environment for our existence. So when we supervene, we depend upon the cells, which depend upon the molecules, which depend upon the atoms. So that would be a dependency relation there. We're also at the same time, we depend upon our external environment for our existence.
Okay, but I've never like circumvene to me sounds like a proprietary word. Can you give me a citation for the usage of that other than what you're describing? Otherwise, we have to post the definition of it because it's a
Okay,
word. that no one-
we could just call the term, let's just say term X, and basically it means there's also again a dependency on an external environment. So the whole point, I'm just getting into the idea of dependency in a sense. So a dependency as far as the parts and a dependency as far as our external environment is concerned. So the important here is this.
Okay, so Nyclot's circumvenience means having a dependency on an outside environment.
Yes, meaning that we exist and we require oxygen, we require sunlight, we require all these processes. If we were not, again, in this environment, we would cease to exist. We would die.
Can I?
Now, do you mean appearance of or confirm of?
Okay, here's the issue here. So you need to provide an alternative phenomenological account as a better explanation of this. This idea of I play this.
You haven't established something to conject against. I'm confused if you mean it does it appear or is it confirmed? Which are you using?
We have things that present itself to our consciousness.
So appearance.
Hold on.
We can agree then on comparance.
Can you?
What we can do is we can agree on mutual terms so that we understand each other, and we can then act like civilized people in the conversation.
Okay, but here's the point I'm making. Everything appears to our consciousness. There's nothing that does not, in some sense, appear to our consciousness. Even things that you believe exist appear to your consciousness. Like if you go outside and you see your car, that car appears to your consciousness. You understand it as a car. You're not going to have this extreme skeptical view of, let's say, obscuring that experience because you don't understand it. So what I'm basically saying is that I'm having this experience of being conditioned in these ways. If you disagree with that, you provide an alternative phenomenology to explain that in a better way.
I totally agree with you. Reality appears to be something we don't control. It controls us. If that's all you're saying, I can agree with you.
Okay, fine. So we would agree that, again, we have the experience of us being conditioned.
Well, I also just want to ask, because under this model, like it was cells under cat we are made up of smaller, maybe contingent, conditional things. But under our model of the world, it would be that God would be hierarched under us, because without us, this God could not exist.
No,
Can I ask?
not for that. You're going too far into the argument. So the first step is basically to understand the concept of a conditioned and unconditioned reality. All this
Before
is
we
saying
do
that
that, hold on a second. So I'm looking at the page that you posted, and it says a summary of the argument, and then it goes on for like thousands of words. So the summary of the argument is over 5,000 words. Is there a shorter summary? Like, can you do it in a
no,
syllogism?
that is this again, that's the side I can go step by step into the kind of argument. I don't have this kind of in a syllogistic form. So it's not hard to go through. I mean, you can go through step by step, and I don't even have it up. I kind of just know the argument, because I understand the metaphysics behind it. But just tell me, do you have an issue with the concept of it's saying that their first step is to show either reality is conditioned, which basically means it depends upon something else for its existence or occurrence, or it's unconditioned, which means it's self-existing. So if we sit there and just have those as the two possible types of realities, do you have an issue with that?
Confirm either one of those.
I would be willing to say that a reality appears to be some product of energy fluctuations, and everything appears to be energy. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, though.
No, it's basically the idea when we have the concept of a conditioned reality, which basically means something depends upon something else for its existence or occurrence, or we have unconditioned something as self-existing. This idea of energy fluctuations is just obscuring it and not really getting to the point. So the whole
Well, it
idea
depends. I mean, if I'm saying to you that everything appears to be energy, there doesn't appear to be anything that's not made of energy. Everything appears to be some form of energy, and energy doesn't seem to be created, then I'm not agreeing that things are conditional in the same way you are.
what does that have to do with the idea of something either is conditioned or unconditioned? So either something depends upon
It
something
would
else.
be me saying that energy is not conditioned.
Okay, so you're going to agree that there's at least one unconditioned reality. You're going to call that energy.
No, I'm not going to say it's reality. I'm going to say energy appears to be what reality is made of. That would be the way I'd express it.
Okay, so is energy conditioned or unconditioned?
It doesn't seem to have any conditions. It exists, and that's it.
Okay, does it depend upon something else for its existence or occurrence?
Doesn't appear so, no.
So you're going to argue that energy is self-existing.
Energy appears to be self-existent. That doesn't seem to have anything that can create it or even destroy it. It just is.
Okay, so we just actually got to the major part of the argument. So you agree that there's at least one unconditioned reality. You're just going to call that energy.
No, I'm saying energy is a fact of reality.
But this is why that question, that premise doesn't matter. It's that you believe that a God makes us contingent. And we think that we actually are the necessary contingents for God's existence. How do you know it is vice versa?
Yeah, the whole point is to proceed through the argument and to explain to get to the unconditioned reality
Sure,
is.
but all these cosmological arguments almost never include God. And so we don't need 5,000 words. We just need, why do you think that we are conditioned on God?
Okay, in this sense, the reason as to why is because of the fact that we're conditioned. If we're conditioned, then we require something else for our existence or occurrence. Now, the next part of the argument will basically state whether you can have a finite. So the next part of the argument is that either all reality is conditioned or there's at least one unconditioned reality. So it's a disjunctive.
But I've already given you that.
Hold on, Walker. I'm trying to explain.
We're already in agreement.
You think it's nonsense.
I'm literally telling you I agree with you, and you're losing your shit.
I'm pretty sure William Lane Craig summarized this argument a lot shorter.
No, William Lane. Okay, this shows actually kind of an ignorance in the history of philosophy because William Lane Craig uses the Kalam cosmological argument. The Kalam cosmological argument starts from the idea that the universe began to exist because the universe cannot be infinite in time. So he's going to argue that, again, everything that begins to exist had a cause. The universe began to exist, the universe had a cause. This
Yeah, but
argument does
Sean
not
Carroll explained why that
any
was a
of this.
problem, so why bring
I
it
know,
up?
but this argument, but I'm just saying he said William Lane Craig did this, so it shows a lack of understanding. This argument is completely different from the Kalam.
But I want to keep on asking. So without us, gods would go away. They are actually conditional on us to exist. So why do we need a god?
Okay, that would be false, according to my view. According to my view, according to the
Why?
argument, obviously, well, because of the fact, the way the argument proceeds. We would agree, given the idea that you depend upon parts for your existence in a greater environment, you are conditioned. You're a conditioned reality. You depend upon something else for your existence or occurrence, correct?
Yes,
Sure,
we
but my
we
claim,
rely on energy, which is not
but,
of
Can I
parts.
can I
but
can I
my
speak for,
claim
can I
is
speak for this guy for a bit?
not that we are conditional on things. It is that God is conditional on us to exist. He is
Yeah, Amy.
hierarchical under us.
Amy,
Because we're an
he's already
idea.
answered that. He said in his ontology that's not the case.
Sure,
Yeah.
that's not an answer. That's just a claim.
Okay, because
Right,
Amy, if you go
but
through
yours
the
is just a
argument-
claim
wait a minute.
too, right? You're
No,
not
that's
giving an
where
argument.
all of the evidence. That's where all of the evidence seems to be that
No,
we
Amy, let the
create
argument-
gods, and so our existence is actually above them. In fact, if we were to be destroyed and our books were to be destroyed, no gods would exist.
That's not
Okay.
true if God exists, right?
Okay, that's okay. Again, Amy, let the argument go, and then we can figure out what this, where it leads to, instead of just jumping the gun. So, the idea starts out that we are conditioned realities. We depend upon something else for existence or occurrence.
Can I
Given
ask
that's
you a question about that?
Sure.
All right. So, do you take humans to be composite objects?
Yes.
And you take composite objects to have ontological reality?
Yes.
Right. So, why can't someone just be a nominalist? Why can't they just say I deny composite objects?
So you deny the fact that, for example, that tree outside has cells, which has molecules, which has atoms, which has subatomic particles. You're going to get that counterintuitive view.
No, I'm going to deny that there's a tree. All there is the wave function of the universe, right? If I'm a nominalist, right? There's no tree. The
Everything
tree
is energy in some form.
Okay, but still,
no, everything's
that
definitely not energy in some form. Definitely not.
but that still is going to be a problem because this wave function undergoes change. If it undergoes change, it's going to have potential to be actualized. So something must actualize these wave functions to bring about a tree. So you could consider the wave function to even be more fundamental to the subatomic particles. So you would consider the subatomic particles in some sense to be an actualization of the wave function. So in that sense, the way you're explaining it,
Yeah,
the tree
but
would
the subatomic particles are fictions. In my view. They're fictions, right? The only thing that exists is the wave function. This is a functionalist view. It's not actually my view. It's just not a functionalist view. Sorry, a nominalist view. It's not actually my view. It's just a nominalist view, right? But the nominalist could say to you something like, well, everything that's not the wave function is just a useful fiction. It's just a useful way of talking about the world, right? But the wave function is the only ontological thing that exists. Couldn't they just say that?
Well, I think if they say that, they're really not going to account for experience very well because you do see change in the world, for example. And again, the idea of composites, we do experience realities like that. We kind of, for example, we see a functional integration of parts. For example, if I cut myself and I bleed on the ground, let's say, parts that make up my blood behave differently than in my body. So besides the immediate intuitive experience that we have, let's just say, or a unified object. We also experience that in the sense of being functionally integrated, having unified states of consciousness, and also at the same time we have emergent properties that none of our parts do, which would be consciousness too. And so the idea is this just would be a really poor explanation of phenomena. So to me, I tend to be more phenomenologically driven in philosophy. I'm going to take what really kind of appears to my consciousness and through an intense reflection better. I think a lot of people will just throw out stuff like that, which is just a bunch of words, which doesn't really present itself to anybody's consciousness as true. It's just, I'm going to just throw out some sort of, there is in a sense of just like basically just making a statement of some sort. Let me give you an example. If I make a statement, it's raining outside. For that to be meaningful in the phenomenological sense, that meaning intention act has to be confirmed. I have to see the rain. I have to feel the rain. I have to hear the rain. If someone's just going to make any statement, And the statement just shows no, let's just say, intuitive confirmation at all. It's just something kind of nonsensical. Well, yes, I'm going to kind of dismiss that. So I can give a detailed phenomenological account as to why we are unified objects. I can look, for example, us. I can sit there and say, look, first of all, I appeared as a composite. I appear as a unified object, even given that I have parts. I also have a functional integration of my parts. I also have functionally integrated mental states. I also have emergent properties that none of the parts do, which would be consciousness. So to me, my phenomenological analysis is much more certain than that. They're just positing just empty words. So things that appear to consciousness, I'm going to take that as more certain. Yeah.
Okay, so I do want to ask that I want to keep on going back to it because I don't think I got a good answer.
Sure.
God is contingent on our consciousnesses. All these concepts, they only exist
Give an
because of
argument
our
for that.
mind. Okay, does everything exist have a cause?
No, not necessarily.
Really?
Okay.
Like what?
Just because we don't have any instances of things that don't have causes in the universe doesn't mean that everything has a cause. It's just an extrapolation that's unwarranted.
Okay, so you are okay with uncaused causes.
I'm open to the
Okay.
possibility. I don't see
Amy, yeah, lots of
There's no
atheists are
contradiction.
okay with that. Like that's not a
There's
big
no
deal.
contradiction involved, right?
But
I
you
just
have
want
no
to say,
examples of that. Do you have any examples of brains or being outside bodies or minds being outside of brains?
okay, so can I
Like
make
a
a
totally separate issue. What are you talking about?
Well, I mean,
I
these
don't
are
think
just
minds are
reasons not to
identical with
believe in
brains.
a god. These are reasons to think that a god is actually
Bro, we need
contingent on a
T-Jump back,
mind.
dude.
Okay, Mills, I guess my point on this, I wanted to say, I mean, dealing with both kind of atheist and Christians here, and I believe Christians do this as well. I mean, the whole transcendental argument thing, they're not in any way whatsoever giving a detailed phenomenological account of a fact and why God is necessary. So if you're just going to posit this wave function, you need to give a phenomenological
It's a wave
account
function.
of what's going on. You need to explain this. If I proceed to give a much more detailed and specified intuition, for example, right away when I look at a human, this appears to me to be a unity, and also at the same time when I kind of introspect on it, I find things like a functionally integrated system. I see things like integrated mental states,
Right.
also
That's all.
emergent properties like consciousness.
Yeah, that's
This
good. You're just reiterating. I
Okay.
completely understand what you're saying.
We also know where gods come from
Any
anthropologically.
that-
They come from different cultures. We make them. Oftentimes they're false positives. So we would say, well, why is it not raining? Because we haven't appeased this anthropomorphic version of ourselves. The same is often true with the Abrahamic religions, which often just go one step further with the creation of the universe.
Okay, can I kind of go into the argument a little bit more? Okay, so Mills, the first part starting out is the experience, and it is so
Right.
intuitively.
No. So that's where I want to stop you right there, right? So like you seem to be begging the question in favor of our phenomenology being real, right? Or having some veracity.
What's the other way?
No, you're saying that you look into your own, you introspect upon your own, your own way in which you experience the world, your phenomenology of things, right? And then you make conclusions about what's ontologically true of the world based on your phenomenological experience of the world. That's what you're saying, right?
That's the only way you really actually can do epistemology. In
Well,
a sense, it's the only way we can know things. That
So
I mean,
I
'cause I guess
disagree with that. But
okay, I can
okay.
explain the reason why.
Do you know the difference between Kant's distinction between the nominal and the numinal and the nominal, or phenomenal, numinal and phenomenal?
Yes, the idea is that again, for Kant, we have conditions necessary for the possibility of experience. So experience in space and time, and I structure to certain categories. This gives objects for me, and I don't know how from that what things would be like in themselves. Now, that's an interesting.
So just about the numinal phenomenal distinction, right? All Kant's saying there is that you have a phenomenology. Sorry?
I'm familiar with Kant. I understand the noumena is a sort of limiting concept as to what we can't know. Because for Kant, he's using more transcendental conditions. He's basically stating, because I structure in space-time the 12 categories, there's a necessary limitation to this.
You think Kant structured space-time with 12 categories?
Yeah. Okay. So for the Kantian,
pondered space-time.
No, he didn't. Kant, you do realize for Kant, space and time are what are called a priori. So this is basically not the way things are in themselves, but the way things present themselves to us. So the Kantian point of view is
No, a priori just means it's truth value is discovered without reference to things in the world.
okay,
Right?
I know
That's
that.
a posteriori
The point-
means with reference to things in the world. They're just talking about truth values.
I know that, but for Kant, the important thing is what's called the synthetic a priori. So do you understand the difference between what's called the synthetic a priori and an analytic a priori, and why a synthetic a priori is important for a system? We're going on a tangent here, but I mean, I guess my issue is here a little bit more Husserlian. Now, I do believe, and this is what I'm saying, the reason I say this is because I think there's a problem. If you want to have every knowledge claim justified by another knowledge claim, which is justified by another knowledge claim, you're going to get an infinite regress. You're never going to have knowledge. You have to bottom out somewhere. And where you bottom out would be, in my opinion, as to sort of like an intuition. That's the only way you go. And this is where phenomenology comes in because
Is cogito intuition?
Yeah, actually, Husserl develops on Descartes. So instead
first of all,
is the cogito an intuition in your system that you're
Oh,
referring to?
absolutely. It's part of essential to phenomenology, ego cogito cogitatum. It's absolutely it's a starting point. It's just an immediate.
Can I just talk to that for a second? It's not a legitimate starting point, right? Because I think, therefore I am. The I think in the first premise, right, already presupposes that the I exists, right? So like it's essential.
Well, it depends on your point of view of Cartesian skepticism, because if you're just describing a condition,
I haven't been able to finish a single thing yet. Why is everyone jumping all over the place?
Because there's nuance that needs to be specified, or else it's not going to make any sense what you're saying.
Right. Okay. What's the nuance?
The nuance is. No, go ahead.
Just, it's not my position. I use Husserl's correction of Descartes. So Descartes saying, I think, therefore I am. He's positing a thinking substance is responsible for thought. I'm understanding this more in a phenomenological way of Husserl's ego cogito cogitatum. So this is basically just what's foundational to experience. What's foundational to experience is that I have an experience of a unified consciousness that's thinking and thinking a thought. And so the whole point is to analyze both the acts of thinking and the acts of thought. And yes, I do take the perception that if I do take this view, if, for example, we bottom out on, let's say, a certain step, and I'm able to provide a more detailed, elaborate intuition of it, I'm able to analyze the intuition. Like, for example, if you deny there's a conditioned reality, and I say there's a conditioned reality, and I can do a phenomenological analysis, and I can basically explain things in detail as far as these supervenience and circumvenience relations that I depend upon parts and also at the same time depend on my external environment, and then show how what's essential to that is dependency. Well, I've given it. You have to provide a competing intuition.
I'll say one more thing, and then I'm going to answer another question, and then we're eventually going to get Balin on.
Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, so we need to go step by step, right? So like your original point is something like you hold to the principle of sufficient reason, such that we can't have a chain of knowledge claims or whatever, right? That doesn't bottom out, right? So you're just saying like I hold to the principle of sufficient reason.
I would, again, I don't think that the principle of sufficient reason is. I would probably have to say. I really thought of it like that because, again, when I understand these arguments, like these cosmological arguments, I see that more as a principle of causation. To me, I would probably understand it more in terms of that. And I guess you could say that to see what kind of version or strong of the PSR I would use. Because the way that I've always phrased it is I see knowledge as something that's more essentially ordered than accidentally ordered. And do you know what I mean by that?
Maybe. Like, I don't think so. So I think, first of all, you'd have to give us a definition of knowledge as opposed to saying, like, what the properties of knowledge are.
Well, I guess as far as knowledge is concerned, the way that I would understand it, probably kind of a version of JTB, but a little bit more like in the Meno, true belief with recollection. Probably would have that as well. But
Have you heard of Gettier cases?
Yeah, I don't believe absolute. I don't need absolute certainty though.
Yeah,
I would
okay,
probably have fallibilism. So
yeah, that's fine.
But
given that I'm having intuition, I don't think I have absolute certainty. At the moment, it's what's the best intuition. So that's it. So when I'm providing these arguments, I'm not saying that this is absolute certain. I'm saying it tilts in my scale if when it boils down, my intuitions are much more clear and distinct, and the other person's intuitions are much more confused. That doesn't
Right.
mean I know 100%
But
certainty.
you're
It just
saying you
means
have intuitions, right, that better explain like the causal the need for explanation in a causal sense, right? But like, so I just want to know why you think that the principle of sufficient reason, which you're clearly advocating for, like, I just want to know why you think that's necessary.
I don't think I'm having the PSR in the sense that I think all propositions, let's say, need to be explained because I think I am bottoming out on an intuition. I think if that's the case, as I said, I think it's more, I'd have to understand the print. And again, I actually brought this up. I'm probably going to have to see what form of PSR I'm going to use for this. Like, for example, when I give these cosmological arguments, I don't use the PSR. I use the principle of causation, which I think they're kind of completely different. I think they're different. I think a lot of people like to say use the PSR. But the way that I phrased it is this, as I said, I think knowledge and the way that I'm using it is more essentially ordered rather than accidentally ordered. And I can kind of explain that. And I don't think I'm using the PSR because what I am saying in some sense, it is bottoming out in an intuition which is fallible. All I'm saying in this sense is something has presented itself to my consciousness. And that's it. Now, as far as ultimate intelligibility from that, that's an interesting point. I'm going to have to think about that a bit. But for right now, the whole point I'm getting at is that I think to have knowledge in this sense, you're going to have something which, in a sense, is true in and of itself and doesn't require a further proposition to justify it.
But can I just please ask, is this God conscious?
Oh, for mine, actually, I don't even know how to understand the concept of consciousness in that God because of the fact that since as I proceed to the argument, one of the things is the unconditioned reality has to be simple. It can't have parts because if it had parts, it'd be conditioned on its parts. And the way that I understand consciousness is consciousness of something. So consciousness seems to have internal distinctions to it. So in a sense, how this unconditioned reality has consciousness, I don't know. This is where I would say I have more of that mystical concept of God, because all I could say is that this unconditioned reality, in a sense, is the source of all. It's the source of consciousness. Consciousness would exist in somehow a virtual or eminent way, but not in the way that I understand it. Yeah, yes, to be honest, this argument makes it very hard to get to the standard Abrahamic concept of God. I would agree with that.
What you're arguing, literally, like atheists will agree with. So I mean, I don't, you know.
Well, I understand that.
Atheistic arguments in the end really don't help anything.
Well, okay, so to be honest, okay, so if we want to say what this put all the cards on the table, I think what this argument gets to is basically this, and you can't really get more than this in cosmological arguments, to be honest. So when it argues that there has to be at least one unconditioned reality, one thing, the unconditioned reality must be simple, means it can't have parts, because if it had parts, it would exist on its parts. It also has to be unique, because if there was more than one, there would be this differentiating factor, which implies composition, and that means it's not simple. The next, it has to be the creator of all. And all that means by creator is it provides the conditions for all conditioned realities' existence. And the next step is that it has to transcend space and time, because if it was spatiotemporal, that would imply composition. But that's all you can get.
Yeah, but like for example, T-Jump will just say that's just like a quantum field or something. So like
naturalistic
you've done
pantheism.
nothing. Yeah, you've not really argued anything here.
Well, I think the issue people might have with a quantum field is they'd say that the quantum field probably has some sort of composition and undergoes change. If it does that,
you'd have to
Well,
prove
not
it
this like Thomism,
there's
yeah, but like
simpler-
some people don't
Hold
have
on a
issues
second.
with.
There's
Yeah.
simpler models for all right. So, are you familiar with Sean Carroll, Nyclot?
No.
Okay.
Really?
So, Sean Carroll is a good person to look at as far as like simpler models that are not going to like just hang upon one particular field existing or whatever. What Carroll proposes is a simplification of the standard model to say that all that exists is a Hilbert space, which is to say like a possibility space of like all possible phase states. And there's eigenvalues, which is like the extension of those phase states and all the combinations that could exist, which gives you something like a multiverse of all the possible universes that are reachable configurations from the possible number of combinations. He puts it at something like 10 to the 122nd power possible combinations of possible universes that could exist. And he says that's a much simpler model than specifying exactly which fields exist. All the fields that exist are all the fields that can exist given the possible range of the Hilbert space eigenvalues.
Yeah, it's a very simplistic physical model, but Carroll's Everettian interpretation of the wave function means that he's committed to all of the possibilities being possible worlds, and when he means possible worlds, he means that they like have some well, not actual, they're not the actual world, but they have some metaphysic or ontic reality. So he's committing himself to an awful lot of ontological entities in order to explain the collapse of the wave function, essentially. Like how a wave function collapses from a state of possibilities to the actuality.
You don't.
But he's committing himself to an awful lot of ontological baggage to make that to make his physical model in this world as simple as possible.
But it's going to be appealing to somebody like Nyclot who's trying to find some kind of ultimate underlying thing that's the simplest thing that explains all the other things. I don't think we can say for sure if Everett is true or any other model is true because they're all just sort of equivalent in what they predict. And when people claim that it has a theoretical virtue of parsimony or whatever, and then you point out, as he just did, that it does commit you to a lot of the same things, that it doesn't solve the fundamental problems that it purports to solve. We just have underdetermination of physical interpretations of quantum mechanics, and we're not going to get out of that anytime soon. But you should look into it anyway, just because it's going to appeal to your aesthetics.
Okay, so you understand, like, if you look up at the article, I think there's a
actually, Nyclot, I'm just going to interrupt you just to say that you can say whatever you want, but then also make like a final statement just so that we can keep on rolling.
Sure. So yeah, Ix, if you kind of look at that real quickly, that he does talk about in the article, I'm not sure where it is, where the simplest possible field is also the broadest as well. So the idea would be something to the effect of like you have an electromagnetic field and you have a gravitational field. So the gravitational field does not allow for things within the electromagnetic field. So the simplest field will also be the field that again encompasses all. So that, yeah, again, that would probably be what I think the unconditioned reality is. And that would also include something like consciousness as well. So it would be the kind of reality which has no internal distinctions and no boundaries at all. Yeah, that's it. I think that's the argument. Yes, I will say that. I mean,
this isn't just an argument for you. This is an argument for like panpsychists and anybody who wants to redefine consciousness as some like fundamental thing. I mean, it's just playing like redefinition games of saying something other than what we mean by consciousness. In the same way that theists equivocate about God's mind.
And how is consciousness not composite?
Exactly. You said yourself, and I respect this about you, Nyclot. I respect the fact that you didn't go all in on divine simplicity and also claim that God had thoughts. That you admitted that that's kooky. Because we hear this from theists all the time, where they tell us they believe in divine simplicity, and then they also tell us that Jesus is the Son of God, and that there's a Trinity, and that God has all these opinions, and it's combination of Christianity and divine simplicity is a very strange bedfellows relationship. But if you're willing
it's contradictory.
If you're willing to admit that you think divine simplicity has to be right, and you don't know how that works, that's at least more honest than most of the people who claim that they think it works.
Of course. I mean, how do you have a Trinity in divine simplicity? The Trinity is basically stating that the Father is not the Son, the Father is not the Holy Spirit, and the Son is not the Holy Spirit. So there are internal distinctions within the Godhead. Now, I don't see how that works within divine simplicity. Also, the Christian God does have thoughts as well. So there's going to be a lot of internal distinctions within the Christian God. So I don't really understand how the Christian concept of God works with divine simplicity. Also, at the same time, too, I don't understand how, besides that, if something is simple, that means it's pure actuality, has no potential in it. According to Christian doctrine, God could freely create or not create the world. If that's the case, that would imply that God, in some sense, has unactualized potential, the potential to create or not create and to act on that potential. That also doesn't work for divine simplicity. So I think these arguments create a lot of problems for the Christian concept of God. I won't deny that. I think if anything, it gets you more closer to something like the Vedic Brahman. That's it.
Well,
Yeah.
let me ask you
Yeah,
this, because you keep wanting to start with phenomenology and talk about your intuitions and stuff, but you at least acknowledge that what an explanation like this is competing with, in some sense, is explanations which don't need a god being in their more simple and adequate explanation. If I can dispense with all of this God talk and just explain it in terms of fields or eigenvalues or Hilbert spaces, and if that turns out to work, then there's just no appeal to this talk about the theistic explanation for the thing when there's a perfectly adequate natural explanation for it. So
Well,
are you engaged in like studying cosmology? Like you haven't familiarized yourself with Sean Carroll, just to pick like the most famous cosmologist. I'm not saying he's right. I don't know if Everett is right or if Sean's right about it, but you should at least familiarize yourself probably with like the top 3 cosmologists and what they say at the time. If you're going to say that
okay, then.
the explanation is better.
Okay, fine. I mean, again, I guess, would you even consider my position? A lot of people say, look, you're really not a theist because you don't have the Christian concept of God. You have kind of like a field, which is the source of everything. That's basically what you're stating. And you are kind of saying it's simple, it's pure actuality in both the political context.
I can't call what you're talking about a field, because it's not well specified. Like I've tried to read this article, while also trying to like be able to keep tabs on what you've been saying and your version of it. But it's a very, very long, rambling article whose summary is not very coherent, and it doesn't mean field the way that physicists mean field, by which they mean like how you can specify.
I think it's using analogously.
Yeah. So
That'd be a point. I think he's trying to say, as far as the field, that it's unbounded. Like a field, for example, I think he's saying that the way he's using a field is to kind of help you kind of understand it in the sense that if you had a gravitational field, it kind of blocks out things like electrons and protons. It has gravitons. If you have electromagnetic field, you have other realities that are able to exist. So I guess the idea would be something to the effect of, if you have this unconditioned reality, it has to be simple, meaning it has no parts. It can't have any intrinsic, nor can have any extrinsic boundaries as well. That, I guess that's the point that he's trying to get at. It's just that and that alone. And I don't know. I mean, what would you consider? I mean, if I say that's kind of what I believe, and the closest understanding would be something like the Vedic Brahman. That would be it. Now, do you consider that atheistic or theistic?
if your version of God gets close to deism in the sense that there is no intervention by any such what you call a being or a mind or whatever, it has no mind in the sense that we think of a mind, has no consciousness in the way we think of conscious beings, then it seems like it's kind of hard to show what what the distinguishing line is between that and deism or pantheism or something like that. Like there are materialists in India, like the Carvaka, who basically just only believe in physical reality. And some of them still use words like Brahman to describe physics, right? Like they did this, hundreds or thousands of years ago before they mostly got purged and like persecuted. They were just using the word God the way that Einstein used the word God, as like a word for the way the universe works. And if that's all you're doing, then um, it's not out of the question for you to just learn more about physics instead of trying to study Ismaili Gnosis' argument.
And then Nicola, you got a final sentence, and then I mean Balin might even be an atheist, who knows? But
Okay, yeah. I mean, as to the final point, Ix will talk about that at another time, kind of my epistemology here, because the reason for it has to do with just in this note. I mean, the people that kind of hang out within that clubhouse atheist and all that, what I call the philosophy trolling that wants you to give endless regressive reasons. I think at some point when we bottom out, I think it's fair that they have to give a competing intuition as well. If, for example, someone like Sasha is going to sit there and say, okay, I have a disagreement and an intuition in this, okay, I will kind of do an eidetic reduction and then explain the experience. You explain that as well. I don't think it's fair that I have to kind of keep giving this endless regressive reasons. I think at some point, if we bottom out at intuitive differences, that person as well needs to give an account. They have to explain their intuitive understanding to see which one seems more clearer. Yeah, and I'll end it with that.
woo
Okay.
woo! Thank you
Thanks
so
for
very
calling.
much, Nicola. And all right, we are going to Balin. How are you? And what are your thoughts on God? I cannot believe you would say something so daring and yet so true.
Balin, your mic is not working. If you're trying to speak right now, you might need to do something to unmute hardware switch on your headset, perhaps. Can you guys hear him? Maybe it's me.
Nope, nothing.
Nope. Then again, that's what it also sounds like when I asked to see if a God exists.
Balin,
Technical virgins.
is there anybody else who can who has a question while Balin figures out the mic situation?
Or if any of you down there would like to come up on stage, raise your hand and we'll get you up here.
I would like to ask whoever said the world's just like energy or whatever. I would like to press on that point.
Einstein. It's a quote from Einstein.
Okay, but you could be wrong, right?
Could also be right. What's your point?
My point is like, what are propositions? If everything's just energy.
Questions, I assume.
Sorry?
I would describe them probably as questions.
Propositions are questions?
Well, you're probably looking for something like truth apt statements or something, right? Which is just essentially a question.
Well, no. Propositions are questions are intrinsically non-propositional. But
You got some background noise? Are you watching TV or something?
oh shit. Yeah, sorry, fucking thing. Sorry about that. Yeah, questions are by definition non-propositional. That is, they don't have a truth value, right? There's no truth bearer or truth maker in that instance. Okay, so like I would just want to say something like, well, if everything's energy, like what's our ontological account of propositions, right? And like if you're going to say, well, propositions are just thoughts or they're just statements, I have arguments to militate against thinking that way.
You're just arguing realism versus nominalism?
Well, there's other like positions in between, right? So like you can be a nominalist about propositions. You can be in like an Aristotelian, a strong Aristotelian, a weak Aristotelian. Like there's a whole bunch of different. You can be like a Platonist. There's a whole bunch of different positions. So
Yeah,
like
I think
some
it
of those
can
are
be a little
realists,
bit.
some of those are nominalist, right?
There's
Like
a lot of jargon going on here.
Yeah, but there's a lot of weakness in trying to claim the ontological reality of words, right? I mean, words are tools, I believe.
Well, let's
at
just
least.
say like what are propositions, right? Like so.
Are you
An
saying that
arrangement
it's
of the
something to you that's not just a statement or an
Yes.
assertion? You
Yes.
think there's okay. So what's your definition then?
Well, I would take a proposition to be like a Platonic object, right? But like,
So that's an assertion. But from my position, you've just made a proposition that propositions are assertions.
What?
You've just asserted that a proposition is a Platonic object. Platonic object being an assertion.
no, but I
You
have
just
I have,
stated a
I have an
proposition.
argument for that. I'm not asserting it.
What's your
You
argument?
just haven't let me get to the argument yet, right?
But
So
you see how it's circular, right? Like any proposition you're going to make in support of that, or any argument you make support of that is exists.
Is an assertion,
right?
which is a
Right,
proposition.
so you just end
you
up
know the
in an
difference
infinite
between
loop.
an assertion and an argument?
So you believe arguments are not Platonic objects?
No, I don't think arguments are Platonic objects.
You want to just present the argument?
Yeah, sure.
Why do you
So,
think-
okay, so here's a reason to think that it can't be propositions are not synonymous with statements or thoughts, right? So,
No,
like,
no. The original question was, "What's your argument for Platonism?" You said you were going to get to that.
I am.
Okay.
Right. So, like, it's basically like an impossibility of the contrary type of argument, right? So, like, if you're going to identify propositions with thoughts, right, you're going to have a problem because propositions have shareable content, right, and thoughts are epistemically private.
Unless
And
they're
if you're going to
communicated.
identify propositions with statements, you're going to have a problem because I can write the statement down like the sky is blue. I can write that 100 times, right? So there'd be 100 statements, but there would only be one proposition, right? So the statement and the proposition are not identical.
But they can be a referent to the same, they can refer to the same referent. And in that sense, they are said to be having the same content. That doesn't actually mean.
No, the statement doesn't refer to the same referent as the proposition. So, like, when you say referent, right? Like, okay, propositions are made up of a
No, I'm talking
subject.
about the content. I'm just talking about the content. Like,
Yeah, that's fine. So the statement's going to
statement,
reference. The statement's going to be referencing the proposition, right? And the proposition is going to be referencing the subject and the predicate.
Yeah. So how does it follow that because different people can refer to the same content because that's communicable between them, that they must be referring to an object that exists independent of anyone having conceived of it and referred to it?
All right, so this is just like Frager's argument for the independence of propositions, right? So, like, essentially, if we're both thinking about the proposition the sky is blue, right? It can't be the case that the proposition the sky is blue is identical with either of our thoughts, right? Because I don't have epistemic access to your thoughts, and you don't have epistemic access to my thoughts, right? So there's no way in which you can guarantee a univocal predication, right, across subjects and predicates in propositions, right? It's a common argument for the independence of propositions.
Right. But as Wittgenstein put it with language, right, the community of language speakers agree on some meaning for words, and it's not independent of the language speaker community that has those meanings for those words, that there's like some place in which there's a list of all the things that people need to make the words for, right? So we could further subdivide any proposition into further propositions and go into greater detail. The fact that we agree on some of those propositions just means that we have near enough usage of terms, but there's going to be an infinitely great many number of possible terms we could subdivide and come up with, or ways of describing things that are not always going to agree.
Let me just give you an example that'll help flesh this
Oh,
out. Right?
let me interrupt for a second. I gotta go early, guys. That was fun. See you next week. Peace out.
Cheers.